The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. I'm so thrilled to be with you here today. We are going to be webcasting to you live for the next 3 hours, talking about topics having to do with autism and being the most effective, efficient team member for your child or student or client that is on the autism spectrum. I know that that's something that's really important to all of us. We're, more than anything else, we talk about ABA here, and I don't apologize for that because we know that ABA is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. And not only that, it's effective for all of our kids, whether your child is very profoundly affected with autism or has some mild issues that you want to work on. There's progress available for all of our children if we use the toolkit that ABA gives us. And we talk about it endlessly because it is effective for all of our kids. And then we have all of our kids are in different places on the spectrum. We're in different places in our life, so the way we apply these tools is going to be different for everybody. So there's lots to talk about. But this entire talk that we do is meant to be not just two-way, but a million-way conversation that we're all talking to each other. Of course, we can't give child-specific advice. That would be a disservice to your child because I certainly don't know your child. By the way, I'm not an expert in behavior, but from time to time we do have experts in the studio here with us, and even more than that, we have access to experts on your behalf. So, but none of us want to give child-specific advice because, again, that would be a disservice to your child. However, there are many things that we can talk about that will help you to apply these tools to your specific child in the way that works the best for your specific child. So that's what we talk about. That's a real plus for me. And we hope that you will partake in the conversation by telling us what's on your mind, what you're concerned about, what you're doing with your child, what's working, what isn't working, and keep the conversation going. Give us suggestions of topics that you want to see on the show. All those things are very important. And I always like to remind you that you may feel like, what do I have to add? I don't know anything. I don't even know which questions to ask. But believe me, you have information that could help somebody else who isn't as far as where you are. And if you found us, then you're doing really well. You know, even if you're on your first day, there are things that somebody who hasn't yet realized that what's going on with their child is autism, that they could benefit from what you know and where you already are. And of course, if you've been on this journey like me for a while, then you know, none of us knows it all, right? You can't possibly, but you have information and hope that could help somebody who's coming behind. Right? There were people who helped us along the way. By the way, that's sort of my thing. I said I'm not an expert. I'm not a BCBA. I'm not a behavior analyst, but I am a mom. I am the mom of a newly 9-year-old. I know it just freaks me out to say that, but he is 9 years old now, and he is doing so well. He was diagnosed with autism at 2.5, and I can smile about that now because through a lot of work and a lot of hope and a lot of people's time and energy and a lot of hard work on his part, my child is largely returned to me. And he talks now, and I didn't know that that was going to happen. And he is completely included in his 3rd grade class, getting ready for 4th grade, and he's spectacular. What more can I say? He's truly, truly amazing. And And that's because of ABA, quality ABA therapy. We got our services from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So if it seems like I'm a huge fan of theirs, make no mistake, I am, because they gave me back my child. But there are many ABA providers out there, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is how are you accessing ABA and what's standing in your way? Is it the funding? Is it that you don't know where the provider is? You don't know how to access them. You don't know which one to use. Whatever it is that's in your way, I hope you'll write to us and tell us what is in your way. That's what I want to say, so that we can help you to figure it out. That's really what I want to do, is be a conduit for you to experts and information to help you find the information that you need. And I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom, so fill me in. Tell me what you need, and we'll get cooking on that. We have a couple of questions, too, that I'm going to answer in just a second, but want to tell you how you can pose your question. If you are watching us right now on autism-live.com, you will see that across the top of the screen where I'm speaking, it says either live or rebroadcast. If it says live, you'll notice that there's a box there that says your questions, and you can type there and push enter, and it will magically appear right here before me right now. You could type right in there and say hi, and I would be able to see it instantaneously. It's really cool. So pose your questions, comments, suggestions there, and we can talk about it live on the air. If you're watching and it says rebroadcast, or you're watching us in any of the other ways that you can watch the show, there are lots of different ways that you can get in touch with us, and Emily's starting to show you some of those right now. Email is a great way that you can get in touch with us. We appreciate all of your emails. We'll answer your email on the next available live show, and we'll also send you a typewritten response, which is kind of a cool thing. So if you're watching and you feel like, I don't get that instant gratification of sending it right now in real time, it's just a slight delay, and you still get your answer. And sometimes we forward your answer off to people who email you back, and it's really exciting sometimes who is emailing you. It's really cool. You can also call us, and we had a caller in the middle of the night that I'm going to answer that question in just a second. Call us, and we will get back to you. And usually what I do, and what I've done in this case, is forwarded the message to the right person who needed to give you the information, but we'll also cover it when appropriate on the show. If you would like to be patched in and talk to me or an expert on the show, you can. We can absolutely do that during the live show. Otherwise, you can leave a message, and like I said, we'll get back to you. You can Skype in with us. We had a great Skype interview yesterday with author Sean Colton. Want to remind everybody, if you haven't already, I did yesterday. I went to Kickstarter, and I did the $25 options so that there can be a character in the book that's fashioned, a fantasy character fashioned after my son. I was so excited about it. Told him about it. He's all excited about it. So that's Sean Colton on Kickstarter. You can look that up. And he Skyped in with us. And we didn't have picture, but we had a great time. So if you want to Skype in with us, if you're a mommy or daddy blogger, or somebody, grandma, or somebody who wants to Skype on over, we love to talk to you guys. It's really fun. You can also talk to us on Facebook. We'll do the question of the day here in a few minutes. I'm having a hot flash. So you can do the question of the day and answer it on Facebook. We always love that. Or you can pose whatever question answer that you want on Facebook. We appreciate your Facebook likes while you're there. We're sort of the pathetic new anemic kid on the block. Facebook. It's a little tragic. We got to work on that. But you can also tweet with us. We love it when you guys tweet with us, and I'm getting better and better at the Twitter thing. I do have two questions that we're going to be answering in just a second, but I want to keep on keeping on with what we fondly refer to. I didn't talk about all the places you can see us. You can see us on Blip. Blip.tv, and you can see us on YouTube. We have a whole channel there. On both of those venues, you can search a topic, pause, rewind, all of those things. You can also watch us on iTunes, which is a really wonderful thing. And Emily, do we have the audio only up on iTunes yet, or it's still in the process? It's still in the process. I know I keep promising it to you, but it's coming. And you can also watch us on Ustream. So that's another great way that you can view the show. We hope that you will. And also, if there is some sort of venue that you would like to see us on that we're not there, please let us know. It's information that we would like to have. Okay, our jargon of the day This is the part of the day, I call it the warm-up. When we take on one word, one phrase, one anagram every morning and demystify it. We'll give you the actual definition and then a working definition that hopefully is not as jargon intensive. So it's all about finding a way into the jargon, right? To be able to apply it to our specific children and start to understand these terms. So today, the term is prosody. And you may have heard of this if you were an English lit major. You've heard of the term prosody, but it's slightly different when we apply it to autism. So let's take a look. Prosody, the use of intonation and vocal stress to convey information about the structure and meaning of an utterance. Okay, not too bad as the definition goes, but let's take it a step further down. The use of pitch, loudness, tempo, and rhythm in speech so the listener can understand what is being said. You know Ben Stein, the great actor, who everything he says is monotone, right? And sometimes it's great for comic effect that we have a character who's saying something and it's all like this, but we don't want our kids to be that way, right? And sometimes a child with autism, as they're learning language, will have that sort of monotone, and it makes it hard for people to understand. You know, I have a really good friend who's a comedian, and she'll say things like, "I'm so excited," and she means it. But I'm always having to say to her, okay, are you being serious, or are you really, are you being sarcastic? It's hard to read, and we don't want our children to have one more stumbling block in communication. So prosody becomes really important. And we can teach this to our children. But if somebody says to you, okay, we need to work on prosody in speech with your child, you want to gain an understanding that your child is not upward inflecting when they ask questions. So sometimes people aren't going to understand that they want an answer. Or they're just, they're not conveying excitement or fear or whatever. They're not speaking loudly enough. They're not pitching their voice at a timbre in which they can be heard. All things that can be worked on, okay? And that is prosody. Our question of the day today, we always have a question of the day for you. Sorry, I'm jumping it here, Emily. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday, that we're in an election year, and I'm hoping that all of you are registered already to vote. If you're not, or you've moved recently, it's time to register. We talk about autism votes all the time and how important it is that we all take advantage of the opportunity to voice our opinions and concerns in the voter booth. Everybody gets a say, right? And to me personally, whatever your opinions are, that's what's important, right? We get a say. And I was talking with my mom about this last night, and about, for all of us, the right to vote is so important. And my mother was talking about my great-grandmother and how she was willing to go to jail to get the right to vote. And there are people in countries right now who do not have the right to vote. This is a tremendous privilege. I hope you'll take advantage of it. I hope you'll go to Autism Votes and take a look at what's on there. But my question for you today is, how will autism affect your vote in the fall elections? I think it's important that we tell our politicians that we are a voice, that we are a force to be reckoned with as autism parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and providers, that this disorder affects more children than cancer, diabetes, and AIDS all together. So, they need to know that our kids need help. They need it now. Our parents need support. Our schools need training. I know it's going to affect how I vote. I don't completely know how yet, but I know I'm certainly looking to my politicians and telling them, if you represent me, then here's a large part of me. You need to represent this. But I want to know from you guys, because I want the politicians to hear from you guys, how is it going to affect your vote in the fall elections? All right, we also always have a topic of the day. Our topic of the day, as it was yesterday, one of my favorite things to talk about because there's so much hope, challenging behavior. We can change challenging behavior. And so that's why we talk about it. It's not just to sit in a pity party and go, oh no, my child is engaging in this behavior and there's nothing I can do about it. Quite the contrary. If we can identify what the behavior is and find the function of it, we can change it. And that not only changes our child's life, it changes their educational prospects, it changes their social prospects, it changes their entire life, but it changes our life as well. And we enjoy our children more. And we feel like we have more control and we feel like we have more hope. Very important topic. So we're going to be talking about that all this week. And our schedule today, we're going to take on tantrums specifically. And we'll, of course, have the myth of the day, and we'll do a segment specifically on all kinds of challenging behavior and finding the function. Function, what's the function? Because when you find the function, you can change the way things are. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to, I know I sped through all of that today, but we got a couple of questions from yesterday and the day before that I want to address when we come back. So stick with us. Back in just a minute.
I am grateful for Autism Speaks because they allow families like me to have hope.
They're working towards having these children live better lives.
There's a space for you. Yeah, there's a world for you, and there's a community that is behind you.
And one that has really been able to be the singular voice for people who are involved with and who care about autism.
I do have autism, but I don't let that become a disability for me. Autism Speaks is going to continue to help those who need it, and just look at all the stuff they've done so far and you will be impressed.
3, 2, 1.
And you need to support the walks. We have to raise awareness, but we also have to raise funds to do the work.
I'm grateful for Autism Speaks for one main reason, is they are allowing me to focus on the research.
The work that Autism Speaks has been doing is critical for keeping autism research on the radar screen.
We proclaimed 2 April as the World Autism Awareness Day. I'm very proud of the UN and thankful Autism Speaks.
Getting the health mandate bill passed in New Jersey particularly, we needed to be able to make an argument, not just do this because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's cost effective.
When everyone else told me nothing was wrong with my son, I got information from a website that told me something wasn't right.
I am so proud of Autism Speaks for creating these beautiful ad campaigns, which have reached people who are not affected by autism and have also created a greater climate of compassion and understanding.
It's been really great for Bachman to have gotten involved with Autism Speaks early on. I think everybody here feels like they really make a difference.
To make sure that we generate as much money as we can for Autism Speaks so we can all solve this puzzle together.
There's no way we could have come this far without our families, without our supporters to date, but there's so much farther we have to go. And everybody's invited to join this cause. We need all the help we can get to make the difference we know we can make.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We always talk about how we want this to be as interactive as possible and to send your questions over. And last week we had a problem with our live question function, and so there was a question caught somebody must have sent it in right as it went down, and I couldn't see it until yesterday. So I apologize for not having addressed this earlier, but somebody had written in the question saying, I'm having a hard time planning meals that my daughter will eat. She will only eat ramen noodles, pizza, chicken tenders, and fries. I think that's a really common story. That's sort of the common lineup that we all hear about. So first of all, you know, I think the first thing to do is assess, and you have, and said, all right, here are the things that the child will eat. And then I think it's important to know what is your goal. Is it that you want the child's diet to be more healthy in general? You want to be all organic? You want to go on a specific diet that you think, you know, with your nutritionist or your doctor's support is appropriate for your child? You know, have a goal in mind. If it's that you just want to introduce more foods so that they're not just only eating these things, that's a really potentially great thing to do, because variety, right? It's the spice of life, not so much for a 5-year-old, right? But one of the things that I always recommend is that you don't try to reinvent the wheel completely in one day, right? No cold turkey for our kids. They don't respond to it really well. But we've heard from our scientists and researchers that one of the greatest things to do is to reintroduce foods and reintroduce them and reintroduce them. So if your child is really into the Roman noodle thing, and you're giving them that, and you have decided that, well, you know, you want to put a green vegetable with that. So you put out the noodles and you put out the green vegetable with it, and that statistically it takes like 20 times of putting the food out before the child will actually eat it. Is that not crazy? Is that not shocking to you? And you know, I think it's great if you don't want to waste it, right? But if you'll eat the vegetable when the child doesn't eat it, or you have a dog that will eat it. I know I have a dog that eats vegetables. Not everyone's does. But presenting it with other foods and not making a big deal about it. That, you know, even if you put it out with it and say nothing about it and the child turns up their nose at it, it's not the end of the world, right? And you can put it out again. Obviously, you want to keep putting fresh out. You don't want to put the same broccoli out for 2 weeks because then you get into mommy dearest, right? You don't want to do that. But find a use for it, whether, you know, don't waste it if it's composting, or, you know, the dog or yourself, put it in a salad or something afterwards. But especially to begin with, not making a big deal about it, right? You don't want to make it aversive from the first get-go. And eventually saying, hey, you know, giving a little bit of ramen noodles and putting the broccoli out and saying, hey, when the child says, I want some more noodles, you say, great, I'll give you some more noodles. Just take one bite of the broccoli and then you can have some more noodles. So that your child is getting nutrition, and that you're setting up the circumstance of do this and you get this reward for it, but not making it a huge amount. One bite, that's all you got to do, and you're kind of like, no skin off my nose. You either do it or you don't. You know, it doesn't become a battle, right? So that's one of the things you can do. The other thing that you can do, besides presenting it over and over and over again, and, you know, offering more of the preferred food if they'll take one bite and then eventually 2 bites, is to upgrade the thing that you're doing. Like you're doing a Roman noodle thing. There are some really good brown rice Roman noodles that you can get that sort of upgrades the nutrition of the thing that you're doing. There is pizza that you can do that's really, really healthy, or sneak something into the pizza, like just a couple of little shreds of broccoli, just so that the taste is there on the pizza. You can get chicken tenders that are infinitely healthier than other ones, or you can make them yourself. One of the things that we started doing in our family, and granted, we have a very specific dietary thing that's specific to my child, but we had to make our chicken nuggets. And so we found something really healthy that was within his diet constraints that we could coat the chicken with, and we got really high quality chicken, and I would cut up the little pieces of chicken and I would put them in a plastic baggie with the stuff to coat them, and I would hand it to my son. Even when he was 3, you guys, he was that little and not really having functional communication skills, but I would say to him, okay, shake your chicken, and we would do the song Shake, 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 Shake. It was Casey and the Sunshine Band, but we would sing this whole little song while he would shake his chicken, and he thought that was great because he was participating in in the making of the chicken nuggets, and then we would cook them. And eventually, sometimes I cook them in a little bit of olive oil, and then other times I would bake them, depending on where we were. And but he participated in it, and it took a little while because he liked the other nuggets that were shaped a certain way, and but those nuggets went away. And so he started to really be into the other chicken nuggets, still loves those. I think didn't we do a recipe with the chicken nuggets? I think, Emily, didn't we do that earlier this year? We did. Okay, January. So I think that's online if you want to watch how we make those chicken nuggets. But in any case, and the other thing you talk about are fries. Well, there are fries and then there are fries. We took fries completely out of my son's diet for a long time. We recently put them back in, but we do a really high quality French fry. There are even a couple of fast food restaurants who cut the fries right there and have them in clean oil. I know it's not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst thing either. Make the best, cleanest choices you can have that have the least bad amount of stuff in it, because I think first of all, paring out all of the extra stuff, right? Get it the cleanest, healthiest, make it a treat, and then move to even healthier things. So there are frozen organic French fries that are just potatoes, and you bake them and they make lovely French fries. You can get to that point. Then you can move to sweet potatoes, which are even better than white potatoes. It doesn't have to be punishment to eat healthy, but getting into that more variety can start with making it the healthier version. And then you can start sneaking things in. But there are lots of cookbooks out there about grinding vegetables up and sneaking them into brownies and sneaking them into meatloaves and sneaking them into hamburgers. I used to think that was a little on the crazy side. I don't anymore. I don't think it's crazy at all. I think it's crazy like a fox crazy. And also, we know from some of the experts that we've had on food in here in the studio and that we've interviewed out on the road that statistically, in terms of research, it's effective. And that if you start with just a small amount, let's say you steam broccoli and carrots and you grind it up and you stick it in a hamburger and you stick just a little bit in. And the child's never even going to notice, right? And then gradually you increase that amount, that you can get to the point where the child is eating just broccoli and carrots without the hamburger in it. Their taste buds get acclimatized to it. So go slow, be kind to yourself. Don't think that you're going to change it overnight, but small little changes, a little bit at a time, can really make a difference. And I also say, too, involve your child in the shopping, involve your child in the food prep. If you've taken the child shopping and you go into the produce aisle, it's very colorful. And if you say to the child, well, what would you like to try? With no expectations, and they might pick something that you've never even heard of before, and in that case you ask the people in the store, how do you prepare this? Sometimes you get the best advice from the person standing next to you who says, oh my gosh, you know what I do with that? I've gotten so many good ideas from people. But let the child pick. Now, it's still possible that they're going to turn their nose up at it, right? But if they've picked it out and they helped you to prepare it, chances are they're going to at least taste it. And we know that it sometimes takes 20 times before a child will actually eat something. The patience that involves, right? It would never occur to me that it would take 20 times. I'm sure that I would give up on a food after 5 times. So 20 times. Don't give up on it until at least after that. So good luck, and I think it's so wonderful that you're wanting to, I'm hoping that it's that you want to expand the repertoire and make it healthier. It's a really positive thing to do. Now, last night we had somebody call in and ask about, you saw our clip where we had Tiffany O'Day come in and talk about the Boston office of CARD that's getting ready to open up. And it's not, I need to clarify, it's not the Boston office, it's the Boston area. So it includes all of Cape Cod and the greater Boston area, let's say that. Your question was about insurance. Am I going to be covered for insurance in the Boston area office? It's a great question, and we'll have to have more information from you in order to answer that question. So I forwarded this question to the person who probably has called you by now, which I love. But I want to tell those, if there are many of you probably who have these questions in individual areas. And I always like to tell you that, again, there are lots of ABA providers. I'm a particular fan of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And you are more likely to be near a Center for Autism and Related Disorders than any other office because they have more offices around the world than anyone else. So I always like to encourage you to go to www.centerforautism.com, click on the locations tab, and see if you're close to a card office. If you are close to a card office, and there might be one opening near you that isn't listed on the site, the thing to do is to call the toll-free number. It's 855-345-2273. Again, that's 855-345-2273. The person you're going to get on that phone, there it is. Look at how good Emily is. The person you're going to get on that line is Amy Fuentes. And by the way, she also speaks Spanish fluently. So a wonderful thing. But Amy is one of my favorite people on earth. Amy was one of my son's therapists, so she completely understands. She's a brilliant therapist, and in fact, she was one of my son's senior therapists that we used to get Amy to come for fill-ins. Amy would be the person who would come with a big shoulder bag that had the most exotic toys known to man that she would bring with her to play with and introduce to my son. She always had the coolest toys ever. And we would get her for fill-ins when another therapist was sick, and we kept requesting and saying, when can we get her on our team? When can we get her on our team? And eventually we did. And so I know Amy personally, and she has a heart that is huge. She will take care of you. You can call her. She will get back to you. And, she's got a lot of people she's got to get back to, but she'll get back to you very quickly. And she will help you to be in the process to figure out whether or not eventually you'll be transferred to Josh, who is also wonderful and has a big heart, and he'll be helping you to figure out your insurance. But you got to start the process with Amy, and she'll help, because depending on like a series of questions that she asks you, she'll know exactly whether it's Josh you need to go to or somebody else. So start with Amy. And trust me, she'll take care of you. And here's the other thing. When you call her, say, Shannon sent me. Right? Let her know that you're calling and that I sent her. That'll make her day and mine too. So 855-345-2273. She's the real deal. Call Amy Fuentes and ask her about her dog. She has a dog named Czar, I think it's Czar Nicholas. So ask Amy about her dog. She'll love that too. Okay. And anytime you have questions and you are thinking about starting services with cards, you don't know if you're covered by insurance, that's who you want to start with. 855-345-2273. Tell them that Shannon sent you. All right. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're now caught up with our questions. And when we come back, we are going to talk about tantrums. Oy, right? So stick with us.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
My name is Deli Popola, and I'm one of the creators of TheHotspot.com. TheHotspot.com is an online support system for families and specialists who are affected by autism across the whole world. Share inspirational stories, find resources in their area. Hope you can join.
Welcome back to Autism Live. A couple of things I want to remind you before we go on and talk about tantrums. We had Sean Colton, awesome autism dad, on the show with us yesterday, and he's got a wonderful book, you guys, Legends of the Boo Monster, that he is trying to get done. It's on Kickstarter. You can go there. You can go to Kickstarter.com, search Sean, S-H-A-W-N, Colton, C-O-L-T-O-N, and you can donate a small of amount as $1 and change somebody's life. Or if you get excited like I do, there are many features, and you can see all the different things. I chose the $25 feature because they're gonna put a character in the book that will be a fantasy character based on my son, and he'll get a line of dialogue in the book. And I just thought that was such a cool gift for my son, and the fact that I can support another autism parent while I'm doing it, I just thought it was way cool. So again, that's Kickstarter.com, and put in Sean, S-H-A-W-N, Colton, C-O-L-T-O-N, and support that dad if you can. And if all you've got is $1, you can also do that too. It's super duper easy. I tend to be a little challenged in these things, but I was able to do it really quickly. Your payment is via Amazon. It's lovely. So support that dad and that family. We love that. Okay, we want to talk. Oh, and by the way, for the mom who called in the night about the Boston office, we've been trying to reach you, and we're not sure if the number is right, but it's not working for us. So if you get the opportunity, call us back, because I put Amy on it, and Amy just emailed me and said that the number is not working. She's not able to leave a message. So call us back. Okay. I said we were going to talk about tantrums. Let's talk about this. We talked a little bit yesterday about biting, and different behaviors come with different challenges, right? Because biting has its own challenges. Sometimes we have to make sure where we are physically in space so that the child can't bite us. Tantrums are an entirely different kettle of fish, right? But I got to tell you, some of the same tools apply. When we talk about any kind of behavior, we know that there is always a function of the behavior. There is some reason why it's happening and continues to happen. Now, clearly there are some behaviors that happen once and, we don't do them again. And I'm talking about us. I don't actually remember, but my mother tells me that when I was little, I stuck my hand on the stove and that I didn't do it anymore because it hurt like the dickens. And so it was a behavior that I never wanted to do. She always felt bad about it because she wished she could have stopped it, right? And prevented it from happening. But it was 100% clear to me as a child. I touched the stove. It was unpleasant. I wasn't going to do it again. Sometimes with our kids on the autism spectrum, we'll see behaviors that actually hurt the child that they continue to do. It's particularly disturbing to us. Sometimes even in the midst of a tantrum, a child will do something like bang their head on the floor or, hit their head on a wall, things that hurt themselves, and you think, oh, it's just horrifying. And then they do it again and again and again. And I think there's something emotional about that is really hard to handle as a parent. My son son was certainly one of those kids. He would go in and bang his head on the kitchen floor until he was sobbing. And of course, I'd be running across the house to get to the kitchen floor. And he would literally walk into the kitchen, lay down, and smack his head against the floor. And it gave me migraines because it was so stressful, right? But the thing I want you to know, and you're really not going to like this, but stick with me, is that all of those behaviors have a function. There is some sort of a payoff for the child, and that is why they're engaging in the behavior. Principle number 1 in ABA is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. And you can reject that, and that's fine, but I want you to look at it and say, at least, is this true? Is this true? Could this possibly be true? And in the beginning, I was like, that can't possibly be true. We all do things over and over and over again that don't have a payoff, right? And then I started looking at it and going, okay, wait a second. That does have a payoff. Sometimes the payoff isn't immediately evident, and sometimes the payoff isn't something that we are happy and content with as a viewer, right? Because sometimes it's a negative thing. But nonetheless, it's a payoff for the person who's engaging in the behavior. So we need to at least investigate that. You don't have to believe me. I want you to take it and take it out and be a field scientist and ask yourself, all right, is this true? Think about the most recent tantrum that your child had. And if it's a tantrum that happens on a regular basis, we want to do the same thing that we were talking about yesterday with biting. We want to take a piece of paper and draw 2 lines on it so that we end up with 3 columns. And we're going to label those columns A, B, and C. So the A stands for antecedent, the B, which is the middle column, is the behavior, and the C column is the consequence, right? And we're just going to dispassionately view our child and the way that they behave, and we're going to start to keep a tantrum log. We're going to keep that little piece of paper. We can fold it up really tiny, put it in our wallet, put it in our pocket, put it in our purse. I have a friend who stuffs things into her brassiere, wherever you need to put it so that you have access to it on a regular basis and you know where it is. Other people put it on the refrigerator, whatever works for you. But when a tantrum comes up, you are going to write it down on this piece of paper. I always like to start with the middle column, behavior. That's the way I was taught to do it, because that's the thing that's freshest in our mind, right? It's just 100% clear, and we want to get it when it's fresh in our mind. Obviously, you're not going to do this during the tantrum, but the first available moment afterward. We're going to write down what they call it, the therapists and the BCBAs call it the topography of the behavior. This cracks me up. It's, what does it look like? What is the behavior? What was the behavior? Your child was in the grocery store and they laid down in the grocery store and kicked their arms and their legs and screamed and cried and then rolled over on their stomach and refused to get up. Right? That's the topography of the behavior. That's exactly what it looked like. That's exactly what it was. And you can write that and get really descriptive. It's really, the more descriptive you are, the better. Okay, so you got the behavior, and I always like to mark down the time and the place as well. You know, it's going to be really helpful. And then the next thing that you want to write down is the consequence for it. So what happened after the behavior happened? How did it all end up? Did the little old lady the next aisle over come over and say, you know, sweetheart, if you get up off that floor, I'll give you a lollipop, while you sat there and went, don't say that? Or what happened? Like, did you scoop the child up and tuck him under your arm and leave your basket of groceries and go out to the car, and then you had another tantrum as you were putting them in the car seat? You know, what happened as a result of this behavior? You'd be surprised. I mean, there's something that happens when you have to look at it this way and you have to write it down and you go, oh, well, this happened. Oh, that probably wasn't good. Don't judge yourself, right? You're in the process of learning something, so write down what it actually was. You will learn something from it. And I'll share my own stuff here in just a second. So you've got the behavior written down and you've got the consequence written down. Now is when you have to travel back in time mentally in your head and say, okay, so what happened right before the behavior? Because that's going to be your A column. The antecedent is what happened before. So were things just going along fine and your child just, slid to the floor? Something happened. And sometimes it's not immediately evident what happens, but take the time to think it through and think, okay, well, so what was it? Did you just say, we're not going to have time to go look at the birthday cake aisle? Did you just say, give me back that toy that we looked at, and because we have to put it back, we're going to get in line to pay and we're not getting that toy? Did they see a friend 2 aisles over and you said hi and they had a conversation and then you walked away? What happened that started the slide into the tantrum? And I think it's the hardest part for parents because we have so much going on in the moment, and sometimes we miss little things, little cues. But do your best and know that you're not going to be perfect in the A column. But you can make up for it in the B column because you sure saw the behavior, right? And in the C column, it's, no judgment. You write down, well, here's what happened. And so you end up with this A, this B, and the C. And then you just, once you get it all there, you draw a line underneath of it, and you wait for the next tantrum. And you do the same thing for the next tantrum. And what you will see across a couple of days or a week, depending on how often your child is tantruming, is you will see patterns start to emerge. Depending on how difficult your tantrums are, you want to call in an expert. And if the tantrums are persisting or they're violent in nature, really you want to call in an expert as soon as possible. But if they're just run-of-the-mill, and by the way, all kids have tantrums. This is not a part of autism. This is a part of life. Kids have tantrums. And there's a specific window in which children typically begin tantrums, and it's the period of time in which they realize that there's language, but their expressive language has not caught up with often their receptive language. They know, I want that cookie, and I don't know how to get it. So I'm going to flip out, and hopefully you're going to give me that cookie. It's not efficient, but let's remember that that's how they got the cookie always before. They cried, right? When they were babies, they cried, and we gave them food. So why would they assume that it's anything different until we teach them? Now, hopefully, with typically developing children, as they gain language, at some point, they make the connection for themselves and go, I don't have to cry anymore. I can just say cookie, and they get all smiley, and they give me that cookie. For our kids on the spectrum, that isn't going to happen organically most of the time, right? There are all kinds of other issues that are preventing this child from making that connection. I ask for the cookie, you give me the cookie. Sometimes there's a whole, physical thing that's happening that they're literally not capable of making the sound for cookie. But sometimes it's sensory things. But in any case, they are not getting to that functional communication, which is when we would typically see the tantrums start to decrease. But we can help them to get those functional communication skills, but we also need to be looking at what is happening, when is it happening, to be able to combat things in a lot of different ways. So we keep these columns and we start to see patterns emerge. And what you might see is, and I mentioned this yesterday with biting, there's 4 usual suspects that you can look for. And one of the big ones for tantrums, especially within a certain age range of our kids, because they don't have functional communication skills yet, is access to someone or something. They want the cookie, they want dad, they want mom, they want the book, they want the Woody doll, they want the ball that the other child is playing with. They have wants, they have needs, they have desires. There's things that they want, and there's no other way of getting it. I always like to say, if aliens picked me up today and took me to their planet, and they looked different and they sounded different, and I didn't know their language, and they had tentacles instead of hands, so I wouldn't understand their gestures, I would have no way of communicating with them in the beginning. So I would have no way of telling them, I'm hot, I'm tired. My feet hurt. I need to go to the bathroom. I need something to drink, and I need something that, you know, tastes like this. Or I need something soft on my skin that doesn't have a label that's scratching me. I have no way of conveying that to them. So how long do we think I would go before I started being really mad and throwing things and kicking aliens and you know, if they gave me some glop that wasn't what I needed, if they gave me some strange glop that was brown and didn't taste good and what I wanted was water, I'd be throwing that food. I'm an adult, but I would be throwing a hissy because I would have no way of getting my needs met, and I would be trying anything to get them met. And our kids, in a sense, I mean, they're new to the planet. They don't know the rules. And the rules that we've had from birth are, when you cry, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to give you attention. I'm going to feed you, and I'm going to change your state. I'm going to change your diaper. I'm going to put something on you, take something off you until you're happy again. So our expectation that they're going to stop that all on their own, we have to let go of that, right? It is serving a purpose. We need to figure out what the purpose is, and then we can monkey with it. So let's say that, for instance, you know, I like to tell the story of the tantrum. My son had lots of different tantrums for lots of different reasons, right? But there was the one tantrum that he would have in one particular store, and when I was keeping my chart, and I started to notice, well, the tantrum happens in this store over and over and over again, and it's always when we go from this one particular area to this other particular area in the grocery store. And so now I'm being Sherlock Holmes, and I'm trying to figure it out. And you know, initially, when you go into this store, it's a wonderful store, and they have, you walk through the produce, and then they have the fish counter, and they always have an octopus that they lay out on the ice, and the little legs are out there. Well, my son always, you know, as soon as he was gaining language, we would walk into the store, and he would say, octopus, right? And so it was a big treat that we're going to go and look at the octopus. And there were other things that were happening in the store too, that he loved this store. But then we would leave the octopus and come around the corner by the dairy, and he would completely lose it, you guys. Just completely lose it and be on the floor and be screaming. And one time he literally overturned our cart, and there was a baby, a newborn baby in the cart next to us, and the cart just missed their cart. I still shudder about it. And I began to think, okay, well, maybe it's something about the octopus, and I tried all these antecedent modifications on my own, right? Because I'm trying to be clever about this. So we would have a conversation before we would go in the store. And I would say, okay, we're going to go in the store, and you're not going to get to look at the octopus until we do everything else in the store, and then we'll come back and look at the octopus. I'm thinking, you know, if this is the rewarding thing, and maybe he's hating leaving the octopus. And we went through the store, didn't see the octopus, and got to that place in the aisle, and he completely fell apart. I'm like, all right, well, you know, and I said, you know, come on, you know, because we're going to do this really quick, and then we're going to go see the octopus. No, that wasn't happening. I tried taking him to the octopus and giving a big, long countdown and saying, we're going to leave the octopus. Is that okay? Yes, yes, yes. And we'll come back to the octopus if you're being a good boy. Completely lose it. And I'm trying all these different variables, trying to figure out different times of the day, you know, saying different things beforehand, promising him the sun, the moon, and the stars if we don't have a tantrum in the store, and the tantrums are getting worse. Now, this is a really good indication of not having found the right function of the behavior. If it's getting worse and it's not getting better, then after a certain amount of time, you got to say, not working. I eventually had to call in a BCBA and say, help me. These tantrums have got, it was after he tipped the cart and I thought that it was going to hurt the baby. I said, this is getting bad, and I don't understand it. And I've tried, I've taken my, you know, what I know, and I'm not getting it. I just don't see what's maintaining this behavior. I just couldn't see it. And BCBA came in, looked at my information, and said, let's go to the store. I got to see this. And very quickly saw that, I was thinking it was access to something or attention or, and what it was escape, because the floor tile changed right where the transition, because I said what's weird is that it's always in the same place, which I would not have realized had I not kept the chart, right? But it was always, we went from the fish counter around the corner and went to the dairy, and there is a very distinct line in the floor where it goes from this very slick, shiny floor to a tiled floor. And he would lose it. And I could have looked at this for 100 years and not have realized that that's what was going on. But the BCBA looked at it and said, there's a floor tile change. We need to, are there other times when this child is tantruming when he gets onto tiled floor? And of course my answer was no. And I started thinking back about, because I don't notice that kind of thing, and thinking, oh, we would always have a tantrum when we would leave Disneyland. Always. And I would think it was just too much sensory input from Disneyland. But when you go up in the parking structure to go to the car, there's a strip of tile that you can walk on to get to the further cars down, and then step off onto the concrete. And we would always have a tantrum there. And I had not put that together. Well, what they did was have him go through a systematic desensitization. And now my son doesn't even notice it when he walks on tile. We go in that grocery store 3 times a week, and he doesn't even notice. He's like me now. We take him to Disneyland, and there's no tantrum when we leave Disneyland. Well, I could have looked and looked and looked at that, and I would never have found it. So I do like to say that as a cautionary tale of not spending a whole lot of time not referring to an expert. But if we do find the function of the behavior, I'll tell you what happens. You start looking at the tantrum and going, oh, well, I completely understand why that's happening. I completely get it. This is what the function of this behavior is. This is why it's happening. And you get excited because you realize I can change the consequence, or I can change the antecedent, or I can change the antecedent and the consequence, or I can, and always, I can give my child this to do instead of the tantrum. Which is pretty amazing. So we're going to talk more about this in the last hour of the day, but start to look at the behavior as behavior, right? It's not your fault. It's not the child's fault. It's simply a way of behaving. When a baby cries and we need to give it a bottle, we don't get all, why is this happening, right? But especially when we're out in public, when our children are tantrum, that's how we feel sometimes, right? Go back to baby years and say, it's behavior. I didn't cause this behavior. My child is communicating to me. I just got to figure out what. As soon as I figure out what they're communicating, then we can change what's happening and get excited about that. Okay, so we have to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about a motor tip for the summer. Stick with us. Welcome. We're here with Cecilia Knight. She is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, so it's a rare treat to have her here. And right now I want to talk about self-stimulatory behavior.
Well, I guess textbook, we're looking at any ritualistic or stereotypical behavior that a child engages in repetitively. The thought is the more appropriate replacement behaviors that we teach, the more those items become more reinforcing and give the child access to whether it's visual stimulation or auditory stimulation or tactile stimulation. So those now more appropriate activities would be more reinforcing. So it's important to teach something that competes and that is more fun than engaging in the self-stimulatory behavior. All self-stimulatory behavior is automatically reinforced, meaning the behavior itself feels good for whatever reason. I have no visual stimulation, so I flap my hand in front of my eye and now I have visual stimulation. So you're looking for a replacement that matches. I had a little girl one time who was not talking but was singing, and it was very repetitive and the same song over and over. Music became a big interest. So when we gave her a voice to have a conversation, the vocal stereotypy decreased dramatically.
There's a tummy. Oh, you want lip gloss too?
Do you find that sometimes parents are hesitant or resistant to replacing a self-stimulatory behavior?
Yes. It's very difficult to always be looking out for that self-stimulatory behavior. I do think you have to help a parent understand that those things like riding the scooter will eventually replace the self-stimulatory behavior.
A lot of us have been there. That's not where we want to be. It just felt like, wow, I'm going to take away the thing that makes him feel okay, and he's working so hard and doing this.
But also know that that's the point of intervention, is not to take away all the things that are reinforcing to the child, but to give them other options that are more appropriate. It's difficult to engage with your child many times in a self-stimulatory behavior because there's a pattern or routine, and it's hard to engage with them. So trying to bring them into activities that are reinforcing with others.
Where did they go? Oh, nice job. He needs a nose too. Where does his nose go? What else? What else does he need? This is my potato.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It is about to be summer, and I know in certain places around the world it's already hot enough that you're considering it summer. And things change in the summer, right? A lot of times our kids have access to less services, and more responsibility falls on us to find things to enrich our children and help them to develop skills that are going to set them up for success, their highest possible success for each individual, right? There are lots of different areas in which we work. I love for example, the skills program. I've talked about this before on the show. It's what I'm using with my son now that he's graduated from his ABA program. It's the same lessons that he had while he was at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And they have a special right now that if you get 1 month, you get the other 2 months of summer for free. So you're going to get 3 months for the price of 1 month. One of the different areas that they have in the skills, there's 8 different curricular areas. And they give you lessons, and you take an assessment so that the lessons that are, the pool of lessons that you choose from are all appropriate for your individual child. I can't praise it enough. I thoroughly love it. But one of the different curricular areas is motor skills. And I feel like, I get all excited and I talk about the executive functions curriculum, and I talk about the cognition curriculum and the social curriculum because we're all incredibly interested in that, right? And then I feel like sometimes I get to the motor curriculum, I'm like, well, and that we're all a little less excited with that. But I gotta remind you that while for most of our kids, motor difficulties aren't gonna be a part of their diagnosis, although it is a part of the Asperger diagnosis, a lot of our kids, they're not as behind in the motor skills area as some of the other areas. So it tends to be a thing where we go, if I get to it, I get to it. But it really informs everything else, because if the child is fit and relaxed and happy, we are going to see less challenging behavior, right? I always talk about a really good friend that I know that, my goodness, she has the most, now they're teenagers, but they are the most well-behaved young men. They do really well in school. They're sort of like the poster children for the kind of children that you want. And we always say to her, how did you get your boys to be so polite and so well-behaved and do so well in school? And her secret is, you gotta run them like dogs. Wear them out. Right? And I always think about that and how important it is, because there's a line past which we can't go, right? That we don't want to run them literally till they fall apart. But giving your child activity and getting them to move their body is something that can help them. Strengthens muscles. It makes it so that they can sit longer in a chair because they have those core muscles. Really important stuff. And it helps, isn't it true for all of us? I know I don't participate in it as much as I should, but when you exercise, it clears the cobwebs away, right? And you find it easier to focus. Well, that's really what we find with a lot of our kids. So we don't want to avoid the motor skills area, and what a great time in the summer, especially if your kid is somebody who is going to OT and he's going to speech, and I shouldn't just say he because she as well, and then they have therapists coming to the door, hopefully. I hope that's your reality. If it isn't, write to us and tell us what's holding you back, and we'll help you to figure that out. But, you know, their day is filled with a lot of things. And they need some time to blow off the steam. So one of the things that you guys wrote in resoundingly when I said, what's your child's favorite thing to do? You guys said, water, water, water. Play in the water. Well, if you're in the part of the country that it's summer that's approaching right now, what a wonderful opportunity to pair their favorite thing with gross motor skills and get the child playing in water. Now, it could be as simple as a sprinkler in the backyard, and they're running through the sprinkler, which will give them the opportunity to work on, you know, all of those gross motor muscles, and you can make it really fun and say, you know, this time we're going to walk through the sprinkler and we're going to pretend that, you know, we're walking in mud. And you may actually be walking in mud, right? And this time we're going to walk through and we're going to pretend that we're ducks. And we're going to stick our butts out and we're going to waggle our behinds, right? And this time we're going to walk through on our tippy toes and we're going to pretend we're picking apples off of the trees, right? You can do that. Or you can just let them run through. I think that kids like a certain amount of structure, but that's not true for all kids. Or you can take them swimming if you have access to a swimming pool, or check with your local community, because a lot of local community pools give swimming lessons in the summer, and they will either donate or half the price if you mention to them that you have a child with special needs. It's really quite incredible. Even in this economy, most communities have something along those lines, whether it's calling, you know, you may have a club, whether it's the YMCA or something like that, but call, I hesitate to say in all circumstances, you know, you want to decide whether you want to disclose to them whether or not your child has extra needs, because sometimes, depending on the people, that can turn into a nightmare. So ask some questions ahead of time of people in your local support group and say, hey, you know, if I call the YMCA and say my child has special needs, am I going to find extra services, or am I going to be discriminated against? Unfortunately, you know, it depends on where you are. But ask. Ask your local park services. Say, what's going on this summer that's available to my child, and what's appropriate, and all of those things. Because if water is what's really reinforcing to them, then let's pair that with moving, and we'll end up in a better place. We'll be more likely to be able to attack some of the other areas where we want to build skills if they are moving and having fun. So take on the water this summer in safe ways. All right, we are going to, it's that time of the day. It's actually late for this time of day, but I want to show you this week's episode of The A Word. This is this wonderful documentary being made at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. They're following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. He's about to turn 3 in the series where we're watching, and he has gained a lot of skills. It's not an easy journey, right? And we see a very frazzled dad in this episode who's got a schedule that we can all relate to that, right? He's like, I gotta go to OT, I'm on the treadmill, I'm making it work, right? But we see the progress. It's so worth it. It's so worth it. So take a look at the A Word, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Do you think Jack knows what's happening today?
Not a clue. We asked him where the baby was, and sometimes he points here, and sometimes he just points here and says belly button.
So he's either getting a baby sister or a belly button. He's not sure.
Good. What about this one? It's a rooster. Yeah. Another one. Sure. Which one do you want? Both. Okay. Here you go.
Jessica gave Jack Riley a partial vocal prompt to get him to ask instead of demand the puzzle from her. Last week, she had to prompt him by saying,
Say, can I? Sure.
but now she only makes the sound to get him to ask. Eventually, he will need no prompting.
Case. Case?
Yes, I want case.
Case. Yes, you can. Here you go. Should we dance and sing? Should we sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes? And you see, yeah? Okay, let's sing the song first, though. Sing song first. Ready? Head. Head. Sing first, and then Dumbo. Sing first.
Now that Jack Riley has language, he negotiates with Jessica instead of tantruming or crying like he would have.
Eyes and ears and good. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Whoa! You almost ate there. Yeah, you finished the song. Okay, come here. Whee! Whoa! It's like you're Superman, huh? It's like you're Superman. Come here. Jack Riley, come here. Come here. Thank you. Sit down. No. No. Jack Riley. No, look at my eyes. No, sit down chair. No, sit down chair. No, sit down chair. No. Jack Riley, you need to sit down chair. Thank you. Oh. Thanks. Good boy. High fives for good sitting. Thank you.
What happened?
That I was actually reading notes from other therapists that are on his team that he's been non-compliant when it comes to sitting in the chair. But right now it just seemed like he didn't want to do it because you asked him to do it, or I asked him to do it. And then I was prompting him to sit in the chair. But then once I just backed off, he sat on his own, like it's on his own terms, basically. But I didn't want him to get away with, if I asked him to do something, he has to do it. And that applies to when I ask him to do other things too, so that he doesn't learn that if I just ask him something and don't follow through, then I don't have to listen to Jessica. I'll just listen to her whenever I feel like it.
Right.
And he's been really exercising just because he can vocalize what he wants now. He wants it every time he asks for something, and then if you don't give it to him, then that's what happens. I do want him to learn that just because he asks nicely doesn't mean he'll get everything every time.
Are you excited? You excited?
He's sleeping.
Are you sleeping?
So what time are you going to leave, Mike?
We have OT at 11.
Oh, you still have OT today?
Yeah.
Isn't it going to get close?
Yeah, well, that's the life of that's our life now.
Let's go back out.
I'm going to go, I got to go take a shower because we're going to have a baby. See you later.
Later.
Welcome back. I didn't realize when we watched this yesterday that this is the day that the baby is coming, and because he's about to get a new baby sister, and I hadn't realized that that's, I must have not been paying attention to that part of it. But I love at the end there that they're saying to him, are you excited? Are you excited? Are you excited? And he says, I'm sleeping. Okay, can we talk about how many things are right with that circumstance? He's making great eye contact, right? And they're saying something to him multiple times, and there was a time in this child's development where all he was doing was parroting back echoics, and that's a part of, we have to go through that phase. But, they're saying, are you excited? Are you excited? And he says, I'm sleeping, which clearly he's not sleeping, so he's doing imaginary play, and he's looking for their response. To this, we are seeing this little boy start to be more interested in people than in things, and how lovely and luscious is that. But we have this little moment in the middle there, I'm going to sneeze, where, you know, first they do the little negotiation, right? She says, you know, do you want this? Then we got to sing first. And he says, no, I want the thing. We're going to sing first. No, I want the thing. No, we're going to sing first, right? So it's this back and forth negotiation. And they mentioned in the voiceover that, you know, this would have been a tantrum before, easily, because he wouldn't have known how to request the thing. And she's saying, no, we're going to do this. And he just would have thrown himself on the bed and screamed and cried, and 20 minutes would have been lost. But instead, he's being persistent, which is another skill that we want to teach our children. And he's doing this negotiation back and forth. My mom just came and visited for 3 weeks. She left last night, and she said the other day, she's like, man, everything is a negotiation around here. And I said, well, yeah, because he's using his words. And, you know, while maybe there are some times, and there are some times when I say to him, this is not a negotiation. This has to happen in this way. But I like for him my son, to have a say. We want our kids to negotiate. We want them to be persistent. We're not teaching compliant little robots, is what I'm getting at. We're teaching them how to communicate their needs and talk to us. Now, does that mean that you're going to get a child that negotiates? Yes, you will. But negotiation is so much better than a battle. It really is. We had this the other morning where we wanted to go out the door to get someplace really quickly, and my son was doing something that was really reinforcing for him. And he likes for there to be competitions usually. But there are times when he's getting, because always before I could say, all right, let's see how fast you can get dressed. Can you get dressed by the time I count to 15? And when he was little, that was exciting, right? And we would ding the timer and go, you did it. And that was reinforcing enough to him. Now he knows, you know, you want me to get off my video game because you want to go do something you want to do, and I'd really rather sit here and play the video game. Well, I could battle back and forth with him, but I said to him, I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can get dressed in under 20 seconds. And he was like, well, Mom, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have a competition. I don't want to do that. And so, you know, we'd spent probably a minute and a half talking about it, and I said, well, you know, if fruit is a very big deal to my son because on his diet he can't have a whole lot of it, and we had raspberries that morning and he really wanted more raspberries, and I said, okay, you know, if you can get dressed in under 20 seconds, I'm going to give you 10 more raspberries. This is my house. This is how the negotiation. And he's like, well, how about 12 raspberries? And I said, all right, it's worth 12 raspberries to me. And so it was this whole big thing, and I started to count, and that included him getting his shoes on and double knotting them, by the way. And I gave him, I think it was 20 seconds. And so I was counting, and my mother was sitting over the table going, you're not counting fast enough. And I looked at her and I was like, because you are in a different space on this particular incident than I am, because I want to be able to get out the door in under a minute, which means if I count to 20 and it takes me a minute, then it's going to be worth it. I'm going to have gotten compliance. I want him to succeed, right? There's a negotiation. He asked for what he wanted, and I want him to succeed. And if that means I count to 20 in 60 seconds, we're still going to be done in 60 seconds. Or I could sit here and count really fast to 20, and then he's going to be miserable and he's not going to feel like doing anything the rest of the day because he didn't get his raspberries. We got to keep the goal in sight, right? Well, you know, then we get into this thing on the A word with Jack Riley where she says to him, okay, sit down on the chair. And he says, no, sit here on the floor. And, you know, there are some days where she's going to say, oh, okay, you want to sit on the floor? You can sit on the floor. But he's having a difficult day. He's not being incredibly compliant. And so she judges in that moment that, no, he needs to sit on the floor. And he says, no, sit on the floor. And she says, no, you know, and you notice that he's emotional. She is not. She's saying, sit, chair. And he gets up and he's really unhappy about it. And she steps back for a second and you see him seemingly make a decision of, oh, okay, she's not going to give in on this. So I'm going to go and sit in the chair. And she says, oh, he did it. Oh, good job. Good job. And they get through it. it really is one of those things, and we see Evelyn Gould talk about it all the time, about how you got to go with your gut sometimes. And you got to know when to push and when not to push, when you need compliance and when you can let them negotiate, right? Because it can't always be a negotiation, and it can't always be that you get your way once a child is able to negotiate. And you got to kind of gauge it, because you don't want to get to the point where you're creating a tantrum, right? There are still times with my son where, and he's gotten very good at expressing himself and his emotions, and he'll say, you know, I'm really frustrated, Mom. And I say, use your words and tell me what the problem is. Well, I really want to do this and you're not letting me. And I go, well, problem solve this. What's the solution? Well, I think you should do this, and I think, and I throw it right back at him and say, well, what's in it for me, Mr. Negotiation? You know, what am I going to get for being able to do this? And frequently we're able to come to a really great compromise. You know, he'll say, I really want to finish this level on my video game. And I go, well, you know, I'm sorry, what is going to be reinforcing about this to be? And he says, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to go pick up my room and I'm going to do this and help you with that. Oh, okay. Negotiation doesn't have to be a difficult thing. It's a great life skill because it's really based in reality. So Jack Riley is negotiating instead of tantruming. Really a wonderful thing. And he's more interested in people. He's making, you know, this whole thing, are you excited? I'm sleeping. A really, really lovely thing. Tomorrow, if we have time, I want to talk more about the prompts, the partial prompt and the full prompt, and why we prompt and when we prompt. So stay tuned for that. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to look at our viewer responses to the question of the day: how is autism going to affect how you vote in the fall? So stick with us.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age, which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community, where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I said we were going to go to viewer responses, but then of course I didn't bring them up because I was so busy looking at some of the things that you guys have been writing in. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to bring up Facebook. Our question today was, and hopefully it's going to be fast here. It is. Our question today was, how is the election in the fall, how is autism going to affect how you vote in the election in the fall? So let's take a look at what you guys have said. Here we go. I'm looking for it. And I'm not seeing it. Maybe we haven't posted the question of the day today. Ah, there it is. Let me take a look on the other. It just was posted, so I'm a little early jumping the gun here, and that's okay because we have so many things to talk about. The question, one person has written in, because it just got put up, that it's not going to affect, but ethics and their history will. That's a very interesting response. It certainly will affect, for me, it always does in the elections, because I like to know what people's records are, and we're going to be talking more and more about autism with all of the different politicians, because you know, I'm sure that you guys are aware too that autism is not the only subject, but it certainly is a subject that is of big, important interest to me. And I like for my politicians to know. One of the, we went up to the ABAI, so ABA International Conference in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and one of the people that we talked to is a gentleman who is actually a member of the House of Representatives in Massachusetts, and he had given a lecture on how to use the principles of ABA on your politicians. And in the coming weeks, we'll have that to show you guys. It was really very fascinating, the whole idea of, when there are behaviors that you want to see more of, that you can change antecedents and consequences to see more of behaviors. And certainly one consequence of somebody not representing you in the way that you want to is not giving them your vote. But also the flip side of that, of making sure that you reinforce them when they do engage in behaviors that you want to see more of. And he was talking about how important it is to converse with your representatives and all the representatives who might be on your state forum or the federal forum, letting them know, and that for him, when people call in, he has his staff keep track of who they are, and that that what he actually does in his office is if somebody calls in and says, hey, there's this topic that I'm really interested in, one of the first things that he is able to do is look and see when the last time that person voted was, which is pretty amazing. That had never occurred to me, that they look and see whether we have voted or not, because it matters to them if we are voting constituents. So pretty fascinating, the different things that we can consider. I always say, you know, you can use ABA on your kids with autism, you can use it on your spouse, you can use it on the people that you work with, you can use it on your mother-in-law. Well, you can also use it on your politicians to get more of the things that you want, more of the behaviors that you want to see happen on a regular basis. Pretty fascinating. So we hope more of you will write in and let us know how autism is going to affect your vote in November. But we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we have a cognition tip about preferences. Stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really, really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I want to remind you that tomorrow on the show we are going to have Evelyn Gould during her regular 10 o'clock spot, and she will be talking about a variety of topics with us about how we can be more efficient parents and be kind to ourselves as a parent. I love that Evelyn focuses on that for us, because heaven knows I forget to be kind to myself. And excuse me, then at 11 o'clock tomorrow, we will be joined by my fabulous co-host for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Alspod-Jackson will be here, and we have a very special guest tomorrow that I'm just reading up on and just fascinated. I can't wait to talk to her. Gabrielle Kaplan-Myers, and she is the author of a cookbook that the name of it, I want to get this right because it's fascinating. It's The Kitchen Classroom, 32 visual GFCF recipes to boost developmental skills. You know, we talk about from time to time on the show how important it is that our kids eat well and that they have healthy diets. We know that our kids, there's a wide range of, well, our kids have different needs, right? And I never want to be in a position of suggesting that all of our children need a GFCF diet, but along the way, some of you may hear from a doctor that it's suitable for your child's diet if they have sensitivities to certain foods. That certainly was the case with my individual child, but please know that we're not saying that that is the case for every child, but if you find that it is an important shift for your child to make, it can seem overwhelming, right? I'm allergic to wheat, so for me, that was the least intensive thing for me. There were so many other things that I needed to learn, but that element was easy for me because I was already gluten-free, and I really felt ahead of the game for my individual child in that case. But what I love about Gabrielle is that she is teaching healthy recipes that you do with your child, and it's fascinating. So really excited to talk to her about how she takes cooking and turns it into natural environment training. Really, that's what she's doing, and includes, you know, taking turns and math skills and language skills and flexibility and motor skills and all these wonderful things that she puts into cooking. And the end result is that her children are gaining new skills in terms of cooking, but new skills in terms of a lot of different things. They end up with something really healthy. And as I was mentioning earlier today, when we involve our children in what goes on their plate, they are more interested in it and they're more apt to eat it. That isn't always the case. I just had my very neurotypical 4-year-old grandniece visiting and who eats certain vegetables, and she was very clear with me that, you know, she calls me Aunt Shannon. Aunt Shannon, there are certain vegetables I eat and certain vegetables that I don't eat. And I took her to our community garden plot, and she and my son had a blast pulling up carrots. And I thought and she was all about, you know, pulling them up and then rinsing them off and taking the tops off of them, and wanted to be there when grandma was peeling them and doing all these different things. And I thought for sure that after spending this much time with these carrots that she was absolutely going to want to eat them. And she said, no. No, not unless my daddy makes me my favorite chicken noodle soup and then I eat carrots. So, but you know, again, I have a feeling that if we did this 20 times, at some point this child would have eaten a raw carrot. Just saying, I don't know that for sure because she didn't stay that long, but we'll see, right? The next time we see her, we'll figure that out. Okay, so that's tomorrow. Gabrielle Kaplan-Meyer, author of the book, The Kitchen Classroom. So I'm really excited about having the opportunity to talk to her, and that'll be tomorrow during the 11 o'clock hour, as well as other things. When Nancy comes, we talk about a wide variety of stuff about what's happening in the news, so it should be very interesting. I promised you a cognition tip for today, and because it's Tuesday, and we generally do that on Tuesday. This is an area that you're not going to find as much in the way of resources to help you to work with your child and build their skills. Cognition and executive functions and social languages. I know when I go to places, those are the things that people are asking for a lot and finding that there isn't enough information. And again, it's one of the reasons why I love skills, because they have all the lessons that you're going to need in skills. And but one of the things I want to talk about today is teaching our children preferences. And whenever we're teaching things about cognition, we're going, like in language, when we teach something, we teach it on the expressive end and we teach it on the receptive end, right? We want to teach the child to be able to express that term, but also to be able to hear it and understand it, right? When we're in the cognition curriculum, we're always going to teach it from the child's point of view and from someone else's point of view, so that they're able to juxtapose those two things and see that they're sometimes different. So I want to talk about preferences today, and we start by teaching the child about their own preferences, that they like one color a little bit more than others. Sometimes with some kids, this is a little bit difficult, that they're not sure in the beginning what their preference is. And I know so many of you have written in and said, I know that I have to reinforce my child, but figuring out how to reinforce my child is really difficult. We start with preference assessments. We put 2 or 3 or 5 things in front of a child, and we see what they gravitate towards. That isn't going to tell us absolutely for sure, but it's going to give us a good indication, right? If you put down the blue bunny and the red car and the purple fish, and they pick up the purple fish, well, okay, that may be that they're liking purple. It may be that they're liking the fish. It may be that they like purple fish. But we're going to take those 3 items away and take the fish away from them and go, okay, good. And we're going to mix them up, and we're going to put the purple fish over here and the red car over here and the blue bunny right here. Can't believe I remembered what I said the first time. And we're going to see what they grab this time. If they grab the purple fish again and it's moved from here to here, chances are this is the thing that's really reinforcing to them today. Not for the rest of their lives. We're not saying, okay, well, they really like fish and they really like purple from 2 preference assessments, right? But today, this is what they're drawn to in this particular field of 3. So it's probably the thing that we're going to use for this next lesson. But you will see over time, as you do preference assessments over and over and over again, and we really can't do them too much. Even if you did a preference assessment before every single lesson that you did, it wouldn't be too much. But you will start to see patterns of what your child tends to prefer, which is going to help you when you get to the preference lessons to demonstrate to them what they prefer. In the beginning, you're going to pick like extremes, right? So that if your child loves SpongeBob, you're going to have SpongeBob there. And if they hate broccoli, you're going to have these 2 things and say, which one do you want? And it's going to be cut and dried for them. And you're going to reinforce and go, yes, you love SpongeBob, right? And you're reinforcing that they chose something, that they picked the thing that they want. Over time, you're going to make it harder and harder, right? So that you're going to put SpongeBob up there, and if they also love Clifford the dog, you've got SpongeBob, you've got Clifford, it's going to take some decision making on their part, right? Just had a friend the other day who was, she's got 3 boys, and they were going to meet us at the farmer's market, and the oldest boy was like, nah, I'm not going. The middle boy was like, yes, I'm going. And the youngest boy said, I want to go, but I want to stay here. There's both good things happening. And it was really hard for him to make a decision. This is a neurotypical young man, but it was hard. Isn't that hard for us sometimes? It's going to be hard for our children too, but we want to start to teach them about which things they prefer, and that sometimes it's hard to choose. And then we're going to turn it around and do it maybe with Dad and say, okay, and we demonstrate, like we were talking about this a little bit yesterday with perspective taking. And so maybe Dad sits there and we have SpongeBob and the broccoli, and we say, okay, Daddy, choose. And we watch. And Daddy chooses SpongeBob. And we go, oh, Daddy likes SpongeBob too. Wow, that's really fascinating. And we might make it harder and harder for for daddy and put 2 things out that we know daddy likes and watch him, then it's hard for him to decide too. We're always going to be changing it up though. At some point, we're going to put 2 things out that our child can make a clear decision. And, you know, if it was SpongeBob and the broccoli, that he's going to pick SpongeBob. But for instance, if you put broccoli and SpongeBob in front of me, I'm going to choose the broccoli. And that's really good for our children to see too. And then eventually to say, you know, with 2 other things and put them in front of mom and say, you know, well, here's spinach and a Matchbox. Which one is mom going to choose? And if they get it wrong, you know, helping them that, no, mom loves spinach. Mom really loves spinach. You don't love spinach, but mom loves spinach. And teaching them that they have preferences and that other people have preferences and that they are not always the same and they're not always predictable. We need to remember that because we're constantly reinforcing our children with the things that they prefer, right? And frequently we make the mistake and think, well, if I love it, then my child will love it. It's not always the case, right? And by the way, that's not only just with kids with autism, but, you know, I love things that are cold and creamy. My son does not like things that are cold and creamy. It took me a while to figure that out when I had this baby. I just assumed that everybody loves cold and creamy, not my child. So we're always learning my preferences, your preferences, and we can teach that to our children within the cognition curriculum and make it exciting for them and reinforce them when they identify their own preferences and when they identify other people's preferences, whether they are the same or different than their own. Reinforcing all of that solidifies that, and it builds into, you know, more complex skills of really stopping to consider somebody else's opinion, somebody else's background, somebody else's belief system, really high level cognitive thinking. And we can start very young with that. So get excited about that. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take on the myth that it's just that we just don't discipline our kids enough. Oy. Stick with us. Well, today we're going to be talking about how to teach children to recognize other people's emotions. Why is that important to teach kids with autism spectrum disorders?
Children with autism have difficulty recognizing other people's emotions, and we as people generally do things or don't do things based on how other people react. And so it's really important to teach our children how to recognize the emotions of others so that they know how to behave or not behave. And so it's really important too that they start to pick up on how other people feel, because it will determine should they continue acting a certain way around children in a play group, or should they do things to make their parents happy or other family members happy. So it's very important that they become aware and recognize what different emotions look like.
So how do we go about teaching it?
So basically, we generally start with trying to recognize other people's emotions by doing it through a photograph or in a book or through pictures, because that's something that's a lot more salient or easier to identify than a person that might be right in front of me, because maybe there's a lot of distractions going on, or that everybody's going to express their emotions in a different way. But then you want to make sure that you're taking the time to go into real life, pointing it out, whether it's contrived, for example. So I say, hey, you two over there, I want one of you to be happy, and then I'm going to ask the child to see if they can recognize that emotion, because maybe something else is going on that's also making them happy, like you handed them a present. You want to make sure then that you start fading away from the contrivedness of it, so as it's actually occurring in real life, because a lot of times our kids have difficulty generalizing, and just because you teach it from a photo, or I sit here and I say, how do you feel, doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to transfer the skill. It's one of the primary deficits of kids on the spectrum
is generalization. So it's very important that we're teaching it at different levels, because ultimately everything that we are teaching them, we want them to be able to use in everyday life. So that eventually we even lead up to, hey, if somebody's on the playground being mean to you, how is that going to make you feel? And they might say, well, it's going to make me angry. Well, what can you do about that in that situation? And then also eventually teaching them, this is what you can say or do in that situation. But again, rehearsing that just in having a conversation is not necessarily going to mean that the child is going to start exhibiting that skill.
Right.
So what I might do then is, for example, let's say we're going on the playground, and I know that it is in the past been a time that the child might get mad at somebody because maybe a child on the playground often always wants a turn. Right. And so I might say to the child before we go on the playground, hey, if someone takes the ball away from you, what might you say or do? And so then I'm kind of priming them or coaching them before the situation occurs. That's still a prompt, but it's a step towards generalizing the skill into everyday life. But the goal then would be eventually that I don't have to remind them of that before the situation occurs. They will have the scenario occur to them and then immediately know the correct reaction or response that they need to give.
Right. And I can't say it enough. It builds on so many other things. Being able to recognize your own emotions, taking other people's perspectives, understanding where they're coming from. So a really worthwhile thing to work on.
And absolutely, and especially too because it emerges so early.
Yeah.
But it continues to develop for quite a long period of time too.
Yeah.
So yes, a lot of skills that build on from recognizing emotions of others and also your own emotions as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. From time to time, usually about once a day, we take on the myth of the day. That, let's face it, there's a lot of bad information that circulates about autism, and sometimes it's stuff that we have to deal with. We have to deal with the consequences of it, right? So while none of us wanted to sign up to be mythbusters about autism, it's a part of our everyday lives, right? So we take on generally at least a couple of times a week these myths and try to clarify where they come from. And one myth that's out there and that we see a lot are the people who say, oh, you know, it's not really that these kids all have autism, it's just parents who just don't discipline their kids. And I find that really offensive. I would imagine that you guys do too, because it makes it really harkens back to the refrigerator mom thing. It's all our fault that we brought this on, that we're not parenting right, which is really convenient for other people to be able to sit in their armchairs and say, I'm sure you're doing it wrong, because otherwise your child would be like my child. And I want to remind everybody that that's really what's at the core of that. It's fear, and we don't have to engage in that. But what's interesting to me is that, you know, because I talk about a lot here, and I saw what happened with my child, that if we looked at things in a certain way and manipulated certain things and used certain tools, we got better results. And the tools that we used were ABA. And so I talk about that with my friends that have neurotypical kids, and somebody said to me last week, oh, well, so then it really is our fault. It really is that we're not disciplining them enough, and using ABA as the example of that. And that really particularly gave me hives. So I just wanted to take a minute to talk about that. That no, there are always things that we can be doing that are different. If your child has strep throat and your doctor prescribes penicillin and you give penicillin, then it wasn't your fault that the child had the strep throat, right? But you're prescribing the right thing to do it that helps to make it better. And that's really the case with ABA. I don't you know, I don't think that we could possibly look at it and go, oh, well, you know, autism, we caused the autism through the actions that we did. That is erroneous, right? But there are things that we can do, that we can change, that change the trajectory of autism. And that's what we want to focus on. Just like prescribing any, you know, any pill that a doctor does on their prescription pad, it is the same kind of thing. Okay, so this is the circumstances that we have arrived at, and now how can we manipulate it? But it was not caused by, and children are not having tantrums because of what the parents are doing, but however the parents can have an effect on the tantrum. Does that make sense? Because it's very vastly different. You didn't cause the tantrum at all. All children have tantrums. All children have tantrums because they have a level of frustration because they're not able to communicate their needs. That's why the tantrum is happening. But once we can figure out what's causing the tantrum, we can then replace things happening around the tantrum, use those tools, and lead a happier, more productive life. So if you have somebody in your life who's saying to you, oh, well, if you just behave differently, you know, this wouldn't have happened, I really want to suggest that you do planned ignoring because it's going to be difficult to change that person's mind. Go about doing what you're doing, put your energy into your child, and then some other time when they see that your child is doing so much better, then if you were in a space, you can say, you know, this thing is going on with my child, and I have learned and gotten these tools that are helping to change it. And but, you know, in no way give time and energy to people who don't understand, are not curious enough to find out, and are making snap judgments. Because we have lots of other things to do, don't we? And as much as possible, we want to be focusing on what's important to us, which is having our children make the most progress that they can and having our lives functional, right? So planned ignoring to those people as much as possible who have a belief that we have all caused this through bad parenting. It's frustrating, I know. But eventually the word will get out as we continue helping our children. Okay, so there's our myth of the day. We normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have a guest for you. We weren't able to have our guest join us today. And so Emily, who we did this yesterday, we showed a TED Talk, and Emily is wonderful about looking for TED Talks. And I had not had an opportunity to see the recent TED Talk that Temple Grandin did. So, you know, who better expert-wise to share with you on this wonderful Tuesday? So that's what we're going to show you right now, Temple Grandin. And take a look, and we'll talk about this when we come back.
I think I'll start out and just talk a little bit about what exactly autism is. Autism is a very big continuum that goes from very severe, the child remains nonverbal, all the way up to brilliant scientists and engineers. And I actually feel at home here because there's a lot of autism genetics here. You wouldn't have any, it's a continuum of traits. When does a nerd turn into, you know, Asperger, which is just mild autism? I mean, Einstein and Mozart and Tesla would all be probably diagnosed as autistic spectrum today. And one of the things that really is going to concern me is getting these kids to be the ones that are going to invent the next energy things, you know, that Bill Gates talked about this morning. Okay, now if you want to understand autism animals, and I want to talk to you about different ways of thinking, you have to get away from verbal language. I think in pictures. I don't think in language. Now, the thing about the autistic mind is it attends to details, okay? This is a test where you either have to pick out the big letters or pick out the little letters, and the autistic mind picks out the little letters more quickly. And the thing is, the normal brain ignores the details. Well, if you're building a bridge, details are pretty important because it'll fall down if you ignore the details. And one of my big concerns with a lot of policy things today is things are getting too abstract. People are getting away from doing hands-on stuff. I'm really concerned that a lot of the schools have taken out the hands-on classes because art and classes like that, those were the classes where I excelled. Okay, in my work with cattle, I noticed a lot of little things that most people don't notice would make the cattle balk. Like, for example, this flag waving right in front of the veterinary facility. This feed yard was going to tear down their whole veterinary facility. All they needed to do was move the flag. Rapid movement, contrast. In the early 70s when I started, I got right down in the chutes to see what cattle were seeing. People thought that was crazy. A coat on a fence would make them balk, shadows would make them balk, a hose on the floor. People weren't noticing these things, a chain hanging down, and that's shown very, very nicely in the movie. In fact, I loved the movie how they duplicated all my projects. That's the geek side. My drawings got the star in the movie too. And actually, it's called Temple Grandin, not Thinking in Pictures. So what is Thinking in Pictures? It's literally movies in your head. My mind works like Google for images. Now, when I was a young kid, I didn't know my thinking was different. I thought everybody thought in pictures. And then when I did my book, Thinking in Pictures, I started interviewing people about how they think. And I was shocked to find out that my thinking was quite different. Like if I say, think about a church steeple, most people get this sort of generalized, generic one. Now, maybe that's not true in this room, but it's going to be true in a whole lot of different places. I see only specific pictures. They flash up into my memory just like Google for pictures. And in the movie, they've got a great scene in there where the word shoe is said and a whole bunch of 50s and 60s shoes pop into my imagination. Okay, there's my childhood church, that's specific. There's some more, Fort Collins. Okay, how about famous ones? And they just kind of come up kind of like this, just really quickly, like Google for pictures. And they come up one at a time, and then I can think, well, okay, well, maybe we can have it snow, or we can have a thunderstorm. I can hold it there and turn them into videos. Now, visual thinking was a tremendous asset in my work designing cattle handling facilities. And I've worked really hard on improving how cattle are treated at the slaughter plant. I'm not going to go into any gucky slaughter slides. I've got that stuff up on YouTube if you want to look at it. But one of the things that I was able to do in my design work is I could actually test run a piece of equipment in my mind, just like a virtual reality computer system. And this is an aerial view of a recreation of one of my projects that was used in the movie. That was like just so super cool. And there were a lot of kind of Asperger types and autism types working out there on the movie set too. But one of the things that really worries me is where's the younger version of those kids going today? They're not ending up in Silicon Valley where they belong. Now, one of the things I learned very early on, because I wasn't that social, is I had to sell my work and not myself. And the way I sold livestock jobs is I showed off my drawings, I showed off pictures of things. Another thing that helped me as a little kid is, boy, in the 50s you were taught manners. You were taught you can't pull the merchandise off the shelves in the store and throw it around. Now, when kids get to be in 3rd or 4th grade, you might see that this kid's going to be a visual thinker, drawing in perspective. Now, I want to emphasize that not every autistic kid's going to be a visual thinker. Now, I had this brain scan done several years ago, and I used to joke around about having a gigantic internet trunk line going deep into my visual cortex. This is tensor imaging. And my great big internet trunk line is twice as big as the controls. The red lines there are me, and the blue lines are the sex and age-matched control. And there I got a gigantic one, and the control over there, the blue one, has got a really small one. And some of the research now is showing that people on the spectrum actually think with primary visual cortex. Now, the thing is, the visual thinker is just one kind of mind. You see, the autistic mind tends to be a specialist mind, good at one thing, bad at something else. And where I was bad was algebra. And I was never allowed to take geometry or trig. Gigantic mistake. I'm finding a lot of kids that need to skip algebra, go right to geometry and trig. Now, another kind of mind is the pattern thinker, more abstract. These are your engineers, your computer programmers. Now, this is pattern thinking. That praying mantis is made from a single sheet of paper. No scotch tape, no cuts, and there in the background is the pattern for folding it. Here are the types of thinking. Photorealistic visual thinkers like me. Pattern thinkers, music and math minds. Some of these oftentimes have problems with reading. You also will see these kind of problems with kids that are dyslexic. You'll see these different kinds of minds. And then there's a verbal mind. They know every fact about everything. Now, another thing is the sensory issues. I was really concerned about having to wear this gadget on my face. And I came in half an hour beforehand so I could have it put on and kind of get used to it. And they got it bent so it's not hitting my chin. But sensory is an issue. Some kids are bothered by fluorescent lights. Others have problems with sound sensitivity. You know, it's going to be variable. Now, visual thinking gave me a whole lot of insight into the animal mind. Because think about it, an animal's a sensory-based thinker, not verbal. Thinks in pictures, thinks in sounds, thinks in smells. Think about how much information there is there on the local fire hydrant. He knows who's been there, when they were there, are they friend or foe? Is there anybody he can go mate with? There's a ton of information on that fire hydrant. It's all very detailed information. And looking at these kind of details gave me a lot of insight into animals. Now, the animal mind, and also my mind, puts sensory-based information into categories. Man on a horse and a man on the ground, that is viewed as two totally different things. You can have a horse that's been abused by a rider. They'll be absolutely fine with the veterinarian and with the horseshoer, but you can't ride him. You have another horse where maybe the horseshoer beat him up, and he'll be terrible for anything on the ground with the veterinarian, but a person can ride him. Cattle are the same way. Man on a horse, a man on foot, they're two different things. You see, it's a different picture. So I want you to think about just how specific this is. Now, this ability to put information into categories, I find a lot of people are not very good at this. Like when I'm out troubleshooting with equipment or problems with something in a plant, they don't seem to be able to figure out, do I have a training people issue or do I have something wrong with the equipment? In other words, categorize equipment problem from a people problem. I find a lot of people have difficulty doing that. Now, let's say I figure out, is an equipment problem, is it a minor problem with something simple I can fix, or is the whole design of the system wrong? People have a hard time figuring that out. Let's just look at something like, solving problems with, making airlines safer. Yeah, I'm a million-mile flyer. I do lots and lots of flying. And, like if I was at the FFA, what would I be doing a lot of direct observation of? It would be their airplane tails. 5 fatal wrecks in the last 20 years. Tail either came off or steering stuff inside the tail broke in some way. It's tails, pure and simple. And when the pilots walk around the plane, guess what? They can't see that stuff inside the tail. Now as I think about that, I'm pulling up all of that, specific information. It's specific. See, my thinking's bottom up. I take all the little pieces and I put the pieces together like a puzzle. Now here's a horse that was deathly afraid of black cowboy hats. He'd been abused by somebody with a black cowboy hat. White cowboy hats, that was absolutely fine. Now the thing is, the world is going to need all of the different kinds of minds to work together. We've got to work on developing all these different kinds of minds. And one of the things that's driving me really crazy as I travel around and I do autism meetings is I'm seeing a lot of smart, geeky, nerdy kids. And they just aren't very social. And nobody's working on developing their interest in something like science. And this brings up the whole thing of my science teacher. My science teacher is shown absolutely beautifully in the movie. I was a goofball student when I was in high school. I just didn't care at all about studying until I had Mr. Carlock's science class. He was now Dr. Carlock in the movie. And he got me challenged to figure out an optical illusion room. This brings up the whole thing of you got to show kids interesting stuff. One of the things that I think maybe TED ought to do is tell all the schools about all the great lectures that are on TED. And there's all kinds of great stuff on the internet to get these kids turned on. Because I'm seeing a lot of these geeky, nerdy kids, and the teachers out in the Midwest and other parts of the country, when you get away from these tech areas, they don't know what to do with these kids. And they're not going down the right path. The thing is, you can make a mind to be more of a thinking and cognitive mind, or a mind can be wired to be more social. And what some of the research now has shown in autism is there may be extra wiring back here in the really brilliant mind, and we lose a few social circuits here. It's kind of a trade-off between thinking and social. And then you can get into the point where it's so severe, you're going to have a person that's going to be nonverbal. In the normal human mind, language covers up the visual thinking we share with animals. This is the work of Dr. Bruce Miller, and he studied Alzheimer's patients that had frontal temporal lobe dementia, and the dementia ate out the language parts of the brain, and then this artwork came out of somebody that used to install stereos in cars. Now, Van Gogh doesn't know anything about physics, but I think it's very interesting that there was some work done to show that this eddy pattern in this painting followed a statistical model of turbulence. This brings up the whole interesting idea of maybe some of this mathematical patterns is in our own head. And the Wolfram stuff, I was taking notes and I was writing down all the search words I could use, because I think that's going to go on in my autism lectures. We've got to show these kids interesting stuff. And they've taken out the auto shop class and the drafting class and the art class. I mean, art was my best subject in school. We've got to think about all these different kinds of minds, and we've got to absolutely work with these kind of minds, because we absolutely are going to need these kind of people in the future. And let's talk about jobs. Okay, my science teacher got me studying because I was a goofball that didn't want to study. But you know what? I was getting work experience. I'm seeing too many of these smart kids that haven't learned basic things like how to be on time. I was taught that when I was 8 years old. You know, how to have table manners at Granny's Sunday party. I was taught that when I was very, very young. And when I was 13, I had a job at a dressmaker's shop selling clothes. I did internships in college. I was building things. And I also had to learn how to do assignments. You know, all I wanted to do was draw pictures of horses when I was little. Mother said, well, let's do a picture of something else. They've got to learn how to do something else. Let's say the kid's fixated on Legos. Let's get them working on building different things. The thing about the autistic mind is it tends to be fixated. Like if the kid loves race cars, let's use race cars for math. Let's figure out how long it takes a race car to go a certain distance. In other words, use that fixation in order to motivate that kid. That's one of the things we need to do. And really get fed up when the teachers, especially when you get away from this part of the country, they don't know what to do with these smart kids. It just drives me crazy. What can visual thinkers do when they grow up? They can do graphic design, all kinds of stuff with computers, photography, industrial design. The pattern thinkers, they're the ones that are going to be your mathematicians, your software engineers, your computer programmers, all of those kinds of jobs. And then you've got the word minds. They make great journalists, and they also make really, really good stage actors. Because the thing about being autistic is I had to learn social skills like being in a play. You just have to learn it. And we need to be working with these students, and this brings up mentors. You know, my science teacher was not an accredited teacher. He was a NASA space scientist. Now, some states now are getting it to where if you have a degree in biology or a degree in chemistry, you can come into the school and teach, biology or chemistry. We need to be doing that. Because what I'm observing is the good teachers for a lot of these kids are out in the community colleges. But we need to be getting some of these good teachers into the high schools. Another thing that can be very, very, very successful is there's a lot of people that may have retired from, working in the software industry. And they can teach a kid, and it doesn't matter if what they teach them is old. Because what you're doing is you're lighting the spark. You're getting that kid turned on. And you get them turned on, then you'll learn all the new stuff. Mentors are just essential. I cannot emphasize enough what my science teacher did for me. And we've got to mentor them, hire them. And if you bring them in for internships in your companies, the thing about the autism, Asperger kind of mind, you got to give them a specific task. Don't just say design new software. You got to tell them something a lot more specific. Well, we're designing software for a phone, and it has to do some specific thing, and it can only use so much memory. That's the kind of specificity you need. Well, that's the end of my talk, and I just want to thank everybody for coming. It was great to be here.
Don't you love her? I do. I could watch her forever. She gives me so much hope. And how exciting is it when you get to hear her talking about how her brain works and being able to compare how maybe your child's brain works. What's interesting is that I've heard her talk in other times, and now she's saying, it's visual, pattern, and verbal mind are the three ways of thinking. But in the past, there was a time when my son was little when I heard her talk about visual, conceptual, and verbal mind. And it was interesting because I saw clearly that I'm somebody who tends to be more visual and that my son is more conceptual. So I don't know about the pattern thing, but then I don't understand the pattern thing. Like when she showed that picture of how you would cut that origami out of that piece of paper, that is, yeah, I looked at that and go, how on earth? But my son would have understood that, so I guess he would be in the more pattern. But I could, it really helped inform me excuse me, about how I was missing with my child, that he needs the whole concept. When somebody goes to teach him something, you got to give him the whole concept, and then you can go to the visuals. He loves visuals, but he wants to know the whole concept. So if you're saying, okay, well, today we're going on an adventure and we're going to a museum and we're going to be seeing paintings of contemporary art from this time period, he wants to know that whole concept, not just, all right, we're going to get dressed right now and we're going to get in the car and then we're going to, because that's how I tell the story. All right, we're going to get dressed and we're going to get in the car, we're going to go to visit this person, and then we're going to go to the museum. And by that point, he's already frustrated. There's so many things in his mind, and he doesn't know the whole concept. But I got to give him the whole concept first, say, we're going to a museum, we're going to have a good time, it's going to be an adventure, we're going to see this kind of work, and then I can tell him the steps along the way. It's really made a difference in my ability to communicate with him and his ability to communicate with me. I'm always having to tell him, because he'll be in the middle of something and I tell him, you have to go back to the beginning. I don't know where you are. And that's frustrating for him, but he can now. He can go back there. So just absolutely fascinating. I love what she says about you gotta light these kids up. And I've always loved that she talks about not disability, but differently abled. What an amazing mom she had, and what an amazing aunt she had. I'm so glad that the movie of her life got made. I think it was a great thing for her, and I think it's a great thing for all of us. But did you notice what she said about adaptive skills? She said, our kids have to learn this, and they have to learn that, and they have to learn this, but that how important it was that she knew how to be on time, that she knew how to complete a project, all these different things that she knew how to do, and to be polite. That a lot of them that come under adaptive skills, some of them come under executive functions, and some of them are being able to take the adaptive skills and put them through the executive functions arena. So, but pretty amazing when you stop and think about it, that she had those basic skills that were so important. And we know her mom was like, we're going to make this work one way or the other. She mentioned in her talk to find out what the child is fixated in, and then to use that as motivation to get them to learn new things. Well, isn't that what we talk about all the time here? That we're going to do a preference assessment, find out what's the thing that really they get excited about, and then we're going to give them that contingent upon them doing something, which is going to help them to build a skill. That's exactly what ABA is, using what they're fixated on and that they really prefer to get more skills out of them. And I also loved what she said about learning social skills for her was like learning how to be in a play. And really, because it's a set of behaviors, that if you're going to play somebody in a play who's feeling very confident, then you stop and consider, you take it apart into little increments. Well, what does it look like when somebody's confident? Well, they stand up straight and their shoulders are back and they're down and they hold their head up and they make eye contact with people and they reach forward with their hand and they give a firm, these are the kinds of things that we teach our children, that you're going to behave in this certain way, to present yourself in a certain way that's going to help you to socially excel. So it is exactly like learning it in a play, which is a really fun way of looking at it. And I especially love what she said about mentors, how mentors are essential. that, you know, so much of the time, and I've talked about this before, that when I talk to parents who really feel like they've been successful with their children, and keep in mind that that encompasses a wide spectrum of kids too, right? All of our kids have different potential, and, you know, for some parents, for instance, they're not going to get to the point where their child is able to use vocal speech, but they can still get to a point where they feel like their child can functionally communicate and that they're really thrilled with where their child has gotten to, and they can have conversation in a different way, right? So I'm not just saying that in all children it looks like the same thing, but in all cases of where parents have been gotten to a point and expressed to me, you know, I'm really happy with where we got to. In all cases, it's a parent who said, at some point, we're going to figure out and we're not going to give up until we get there. That they just had the fight. And in almost all of those cases, they figured out what their child was particularly interested in and found ways to get someone who could do that, to talk to their child or to take them on the tour or do something. You know, we had Christina Adams on a couple of months ago, and she's the author of A Real Boy, and her son was fascinated with planes. And in her book, she talks about going to the local municipal airport and finding a pilot and saying, can my child come and sit in your plane, and can you, you know, show him some of the things, and how it was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. There are so many different circumstances where parents have said, well, you know, this is what my child has expressed interest in, so we're going to figure it out. My son is really into science and space, and I'm lucky that the Jet Propulsion Lab for NASA is close by us, and they open it up once a year. And you know, he's been able to talk to rocket scientists over the years, and last year we got to go and take the whole tour, and I'm hoping either this summer or next summer that we're going to get to Houston, and I've already found somebody who can give me the behind the scenes. You know, I'm that mom working it, right? We need to do that for our kids. Find the way, work it however you need to work it, get the mentor for your child, because, you know, there are different ways of doing things, and I love this whole idea of the acceptance and the contentment with the fact that their brains are different, but it doesn't have to hold them back. In fact, it can propel them. And then if we hook them up with mentors, because I'm not going to be able to do the rocket science stuff, right? It is so far above my pay grade that we can't even go there, right? In fact, last night on the way to the airport, I was talking to my mother about, you know, it's just a matter of time before my son's going to be doing trigonometry, and I'm going to be in deep doo-doo because I'm not going to be able to keep up with that conversation. I was fine with the multiplication tables, but when, Mama's not going to be able to go there. Mentors, how important it is to find people who can help them to channel all of these different things to their benefit. I love that Temple was saying, you know, get these kids in Silicon Valley where they belong, and the whole crowd laughs. And her saying it like it is, that I think that this room full of very successful people are people who are probably a little bit more on the spectrum than your average audience. What a wonderful, wonderful thing for us as parents to hear and be reminded that, you know, we need to look for where our children's skill levels are and play to them. We're always going to be shoring up the things that they have deficits, but giving them the chance to soar. Wonderful, wonderful TED Talk by Temple Grandin. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about challenging behavior. So stick with us. We're here today with Sarah Cho, who is the managing supervisor of the CARD Fresno office, and it's a special treat for us to have her with us today. Yeah. And we're going to be asking her to talk to us about working with children who are nonverbal. So when a child is not speaking, are we saying that they're non-vocal or non-verbal?
The correct terminology is non-vocal.
Okay.
Because when we're saying vocal, vocal means sound. So sound is being emitted.
Okay.
So verbal means that the child is able to communicate to another person that they need something, they have desires, they have wants, and a verbal response might be handing a picture.
Okay.
Might also be a sign. Might also be pressing a button to ask for something.
Okay.
Those would all be considered verbal behavior. But if they don't have speech, we might say that they're non-vocal. So imagine then if you have a child who's not developing speech typically, they have no way to tell their parent what they need, you're going to see frustration levels increase. And if I don't have a way to appropriately get my point across, I'm going to start developing some really bad excessive behaviors to communicate.
Right.
So that's when we start to see the noncompliance, the tantrums, the aggression, even self-injurious behaviors emerge. We're going to use really short and concise and clear speech. Pair it with a gesture. And then when the child starts responding, immediately praise. Right. Immediately give a reward. So then that way the child is starting to understand, I got it. I'm understanding what she's wanting me to do. At the same time as working on receptive instructions, we do need to teach the child also a way for them to communicate too. Right. So we're going to start working on very basic requesting behavior. So they're able to request for things. And so the two kind of go hand in hand.
If there are no sounds, then maybe we start with signs.
You could start with signs, or you could start with an icon. As a parent, you're going to know your kid best in the sense that you're going to know kind of what they like. If you have a kiddo who likes to look at pictures, who likes to look at books, maybe an icon is going to be something that would be preferred, and they would get really good at giving it. If you have a child who is, you're like, wow, you know, they have really great fine motor. Maybe they can already string beads. Maybe they can do a shape sorter. You know, the ability to manipulate their hands and their fingers is pretty solid. Maybe you might want to work on some very basic signs.
Okay, so taking whatever the strength is and running with that.
Absolutely. So let's say that you do an icon or you do a sign. Both of those forms of communication have been linked to development of expressive speech. So, you know, if that's something that we're starting with today because we need to get through today, that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to end up doing tomorrow.
Welcome back. Our topic today all day has been challenging behavior, and we talked a little bit about tantrums before. I wanted to take it on a little bit more and talk a little bit about meltdowns because they're a real part of our life, and we talked a little bit about finding the function of the behavior earlier today. But I want to reiterate that tantrums are a normal part of development. If we have an expectation that we're going to have a child on the spectrum or off the spectrum with no tantrums, we are going to find ourselves in deep resentment, right? Because it's going to happen. It's logical. It makes sense. Our children they were born and they learned very quickly, I cry, somebody takes care of my needs. We can't have an expectation that that is going to change overnight. And as they begin to realize there are things in the world that I want, and things in the world that I don't want, and people that I want to be near, I have preferences, I have needs, I have issues, and I don't have words to convey them, they are going to engage in challenging behavior, tantrums, and meltdowns in the hopes of getting their needs met. It's what worked for a while. I cried, you took care of me. But we can change some things to help any child to transition from tantrums into being able to have functional communication skills. And I said any child because it's really true. What we see with children on the spectrum is often that they have a real delay in speech. They are behind in acquiring the things that a typically developing child would develop. So they tend to be having more tantrums longer and lasting longer and, you know, over a longer period of time because they haven't made the shift into getting our needs met. So we're going to teach functional communication skills to our children, which in some cases is not going to be vocal speech. And we're going to teach it in very specific ways to help them. But there's other things that we need to be aware of in terms of tantrum. Tantrums serve a purpose, right? We said there's a function of, and here are some of the different things. children engage in tantrums to get attention. I'm sure we have all seen the video. I'm laughing because it's funny when we remove ourselves from the emotional situation and don't think of this as lasting the rest of our lives, right? And on Funniest Home Videos, there's at least 2 videos that I'm aware of that they're on YouTube, and you can search for them. America's Funniest Home Video, Tantruming Child, right? And the one in particular that I could think of, the little girl, she's in the little dress, and the mom is standing there videotaping, and the little girl sees the video camera and flings her head back and lays down on the floor and is, oh, you know, crying hysterically, right? And the mom steps behind a partition so that the child can no longer see the camera, and the child immediately, you can't see the child, but the child stops crying, gets up, and walks over, you know, and is looking totally fine, completely self-possessed, looks and sees the mom and the camera and goes, and throws the head back and falls down on the floor again and cries. So the mom moves someplace else, the crying stops. In some cases, the child crawls over, oh, you can see me now? Right? Clearly, this is attention driven, right? Looking for some attention. And remember that when a child wants attention, it doesn't matter whether it's good attention or bad attention, right? We're putting those terms on it. If I'm yelling at the child, that's bad attention, right? To a child, it's just attention. And not just children. I mean, look at the tabloids. There are adults who, it's attention. Attention, attention, attention. So that's one reason that children tantrum. It's not the only reason, though. Sometimes they tantrum to get out of something. How many times have we seen this? We call it, in our house, we call it the Grandin maneuver, and a friend of mine calls it spaghetti legs. You know, you're taking the child, you're walking towards something or away from something, and the child just engages in civil disobedience, right? It's like they were there with Gandhi and Martin Luther King and took notes, and they let their whole bodies go limp, and they're there on the sidewalk, and you're now dragging a hand behind you trying to get where you need to get. Well, this is a form of a tantrum, and they're getting out of doing something, right? Or you say to a child, you know, I need for you to pick up your toys, and the child, and they're on the floor, and they're, in that moment in time, they're not having to pick up the toys, right? It's working. Okay, to get something that they want. We've seen children in the line at the grocery store tantrum to get the candy in the aisle. And this includes gaining control over another person or of a situation, and gaining access to rituals or routines. We see with our kids on the spectrum in particular that they have something that they want to do. In one of the early episodes of the A Word, we saw Jack Riley playing with his train, and he laid down so he could look at the wheels of the train. Well, you know what? That is not how a typically developing child plays with a car. It prevents socialization. It's fascinating to our kids on the spectrum. I don't know why. I don't know that anybody knows why. But in any case, it prevents them from getting to the next phase of play, because there's a phase of play where they're playing by themselves, then they're playing side by side with a peer, and then eventually they turn and interact with the peer, right? But if you're laying on the floor, guess what happens? You're not going to be able to turn and interact, and you're going to miss a whole milestone of social language. So the therapist, you know, has to correct him and sits him up and says, you know, look nicely. And he doesn't want to do that. And so he throws a tantrum because he wants access to being able to watch his train the way he wants to. You know, I want to do things my way. Don't you want to do things your way? Except there are some things that we do that are not productive. And if we had a coach or a trainer, they would say, oh, this is not the productive way of doing it, right? But I want to do it that way. Yeah, but you're not going to, because it's not going to get you where you want to go. Same thing with our kids. But they will tantrum to gain access to that ritualistic behavior. And our kids tantrum to offer protest. I don't like what's happening, and I want you to know about it. Haven't you wanted to throw a tantrum because of that? I have. And we cannot forget that tantrums feel good. They do feel good. And there's a wonderful commercial on YouTube of a mom who's in the aisle, the cereal aisle with her child, and she's saying something about, you know, which cereal do you want? And the child's getting ready. He's puffing up to go there. Oh, yeah. And the mom goes, I want to get that one. And she throws herself on the floor and goes, I want it, I want want it, I want it. And the kid just looks at her like, what just happened? And the mom gets back up and says, okay, so we're going to get the one that I want. And he goes, all right, right? And the mom goes, oh, I feel so much better. There is something that feels good about it. And, you know, because it's a physical display, it's a vocal display, and you've expressed your frustration. And if you get rewarded by it, why wouldn't you keep doing it again? If the mom can throw herself on the floor and the kid says, yeah, we'll take the cereal that you want, why wouldn't you do it more? So we have to be really careful that we're not rewarding tantrums, right? Because unfortunately, if children are rewarded for them, they're gonna keep doing it. There's no good reason not to tantrum. I'm sure that there's at least one adult in your life that you see on a regular basis that throws what we call hissy fits in my family. You know, male or female, or equal opportunity, right? There's an adult in your life probably that still is throwing tantrums. And when you ask yourself why, it's because along the line, it has worked for them. You know, we want to make sure that we're not rewarding behavior that we don't want to see more of. It's hard sometimes, but as much as possible, we want to do that. Okay, so dealing with tantrums and children with developmental delays and their ability to communicate, we're going to see that the tantrum is going to have the potential to continue on for a longer period of time. The duration is going to, the individual tantrum is going to be worse, and the scope of it is going to be worse. So we want to be aware of that, and just, you know, if we're cognizant of it, we can start to make a difference. Okay, so dealing with a tantrum, again, we're going to think of it in terms of what's the antecedent, the ABC. The antecedent's what happened before the tantrum. There's the tantrum, and then there's the consequence that happens after the tantrum. All right, so let's say you have all this knowledge, but you don't know how to implement it yet, and today you're at the grocery store and your child has a tantrum. So what do we do when it's happening? It's great to talk about, well, we want to head these things off at the pass, except sometimes you can't, right? So what do we do then? And the first most important thing is to keep ourselves calm. I know that seems like a well, duh, but it's really hard to do. I remember the first time that I watched my child throw a tantrum with therapists there, and I was so relieved. I was like, see, this is it. This is the thing I want you to help me do. right here, this is it. And I remember looking at them, and they, you know, were moving about their lives and totally as if nothing was happening. And I was thinking, what's up with that? My kid is throwing a tantrum here. You know, you don't seem to be at all concerned about it at all, because they weren't. And even when they were concerned about it, they had a mask of indifference because they didn't want to inadvertently, in case, in this moment in time, you don't know what the function of this tantrum is, but what if it's attention? And then you give the attention. Well, then you got that much more work you got to do, right? So keeping that mask of indifference, this is not the same thing as tuning out, right? You're very hyper aware, you know exactly where your child is, but you're not there going, you know, Rebecca, don't throw that tantrum. Stop it right now, because you're just feeding that flame, going, keep on with that, because you got my full attention now, right? I talked about a couple of weeks ago being in the store, in one of those big stores, and the guy with the little girl in the cart, and she's, you know, the whole time, and he's going, stop crying, don't do that, stop crying. And the more he said it, the more she cried and the more she screamed. And I just wanted to go over and say, hey, is what you're doing working? And if it's not, why don't you try something else, right? But you can't. Right? That's the other rule that we have, is when another child is having a tantrum, we stay out of it. We stay out of it and let the parent deal with it, because we don't want to add to what's going on, right? And we wish that that message would get out to the world. But I wanted to go over and say, it's not working. Stop talking to her about it and telling her to stop. Clearly she's not going to stop. But then eventually the mom came over and said, honey, can you go over and look in the tools and find something for me? And she walked away with the cart, and the girl immediately stopped crying. The mom wasn't saying, stop it. Whew. In any case, stay calm. Stay calm and know that whatever happens, you're going to be able to handle it. Even if it's a lie you're telling yourself in the moment, things will go better if you're telling yourself that lie. Don't take this moment to talk to your child about tantrums and to teach them about what's appropriate and try to give a replacement behavior in this moment. You're going to do that another time, right? Haven't we all been in the circumstance where we're really unhappy and something happens and somebody stands there and says, well, you know what you should have done? Really? While I'm upset, you want to tell me how I blew this and how, I don't want to hear that in the moment. You can tell me that afterwards. You can tell me that beforehand. But in the moment that I'm upset and having emotions, I'm not going to deal well with that. Imagine being a 4-year-old who doesn't have great receptive language skills. This is when we're going to get a child that's hitting, right? This is not the teaching opportunity. There are lots of other teaching opportunities. So during the tantrum, we're staying calm and we're not teaching them in that moment. We are going to remove potentially hazardous items that they could hurt themselves on, that they could break, or that they could hurt somebody else. My husband and I got really good. My son, when he would tantrum, he was a great swiper. He would just, boom, and the whole table would be cleared off of everything that anybody had, right? Food, papers, expensive things, computers. So we got very good at recognizing the signs, and when he went there, the first thing that we would do is very calmly pick up everything and put it someplace else. And, it wasn't an option. It just wasn't an option. And then in some cases, we're going to practice something called planned ignoring. Really important that you realize that it's not the same thing as ignoring. It's planned ignoring where you're making it look like you're ignoring the child, but you're hyper vigilant, aware of everything that's going on. We're not going to, completely ignore the child. That would be unsafe, right? But I always talk about the example when my son, the first time that I really got ABA, my son was hitting his head against the kitchen floor and throwing the tantrum, and the therapist was there and said, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stick with you through this. And he said, don't give it attention. Find something else to do, but you're right here in the room with us. But you're not concerned about it. And so I started watering the plants. And my child, Mommy. We made sure that he couldn't hurt himself anymore on the kitchen floor, but then I went about watering the plants and not attending to what he was doing, but I was very aware of where he was. I wasn't ignoring him, but I was ignoring the behavior of the screaming and the crying and the ranting and the raving. And eventually, when he was calm for like 4 seconds, then I looked at him and said, would you like a drink of water? And then if he screamed and cried, I went back to ignoring, because in that moment you really are teaching your child. When you're going to engage in this behavior, you're not going to get my attention, and you're not going to get access to the thing that you wanted, and you're not going to get to escape whatever it was. So we do planned ignoring of parts of the behavior that are unacceptable. Okay, what we don't want to do during the tantrum is reward the child in order to get them to stop. Lots of time for negotiation, right? But not in the middle of a tantrum. Because if we give in and give them the thing that they wanted, whether it was attention or access to something or to escape something, what we did was teach them, okay, all I have to do is throw a hissy fit and I get out of it, or I get the thing that I want, or I get the attention that I want. So we do not reward them with what they wanted in order to get them to stop. We do not put the child somewhere by themselves. That is a recipe for somebody getting hurt. We do not want that. We do not scold, nag, or lose our tempers or berate the child for their behavior or the way that they're feeling. Oh, it's hard, right? Because you just want to go, stop, don't do that, stop. We all, as much as I was wanting to gag that dad, I completely understand it, because I want to do that and sometimes do that and catch myself, if I'm lucky, and go, why are you doing that? That's not working. How about we try something that actually works? Scolding, nagging, yelling, losing our temper, or berating the child for their behavior don't work. They just don't. So as much as possible, we have to let go of those things. Okay, acceptance and control. For every behavior, there's the before and the after. Those are the things that we have control over. The behavior itself, our children get to a point where they're big enough that we really can't control the behavior, right? We can't physically, what? We're going to tie them up and put them in a mummy costume? Not likely. Usually we have little to no control over behavior as it is actually happening. But we do have so much control over what happens before and so much control over what happens after. So that's where we have to get acceptance about. That, you know, if you try to restrain the child while they're kicking and screaming and throwing themselves on the floor, you really have to know what you're doing to restrain a child. And I don't recommend that you attempt to restrain a child unless you're getting professional help to show you what to do. It's not going to be effective. You're likely to hurt yourself or your child, or have them hurt you or themselves. So accept that you have very little control, which does not mean you give up, right? But take control over what you do have control over. It's the serenity prayer, right? Accept the things you cannot change, courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So you have control over the antecedent, you have control over the consequence. Take control over those things. Especially the consequence, because that's the thing that's cut and dried. If you are giving in to the child, and then the consequence for the behavior was they got what they wanted, the behavior is going to happen more often. Instead, you know, if the child says, well, I'm going to do this, and and by throwing themselves on the floor, that is what they're saying, right? There may be no words, but they're saying, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to do it my way, right? That's the communication. And if we in any way go, okay, with that, then we have a much longer haul to fix that. So we try not to give in. So consequence, you really can have a great deal of control over. Antecedent, a lot of times you can have control over that, right? Because you can control what happens beforehand. Not all the time, right? Just like not all the time can you have control over consequence, because sometimes you may not be giving it attention, but the little well-meaning lady in the next aisle over who hands your child a lollipop, right? And you don't have control over her and what she does. You can say, no, I'm sorry, you can't give that to the child, but chances are that your child's going to escalate the tantrum at that point because somebody else was giving in to him and you didn't have control over it. So important to know, but a lot of times you really do have control over either the antecedent or the consequence, and can change things in a way so that you don't get that kind of behavior. Even as simple as a good example of an antecedent modification, if your child has difficulty with transitions, and setting your child up to understand, I'm going to give you certain cues and then we're going to go and do something, and there's going to be consequences that are good for listening to me and doing those things. So, you know, for instance, you took your child, you went to the community pool and it was time to get out of the pool and it was time to go home, and you said to the child, we need to go, and you got a tantrum, and we continue to have tantrums every time we leave the pool. So what you would do is back it up, and 20 minutes or even before you go to the pool, you say, you know, we're going to go to the pool, and then when it's time to get out of the pool, mommy's going to give you a 4-minute warning and a 3-minute warning and a 2-minute warning and a 1-minute warning. And then when I say it's time to get out of the pool, you're going to do a great job. You're going to get out of the pool. And when you do it the first time that I ask you, when I say it's time, and you've given them all those warnings, then, you know, we're going to get to go here. We're going to get to do this, right? So we've set up some sort of reward that's worthwhile for the child, and we gave them a whole bunch of warnings, and, you know, and maybe we pare that down over time so that we're only giving a 3-minute warning, we're only giving a 2-minute warning, but we're constantly setting them up for the success, letting them know this thing is going to happen, and when it does, it's going to look like this, and when you behave this way, here's my total expectation, when you behave this way, you're going to get something for it. And remind them, you know, and we're going to come back and swim tomorrow too, so that this isn't going to be the last time that you're in the pool, because it feels, everything to a child feels like now, right? And don't we envy them that? It's now. This is life and death. It's all happening right in this moment. I'm never going to be able to swim again. Oh, the humanity. But they don't know. And we don't want to make fun of them for that, although I just did, but they weren't here, hopefully. But we want to give them the skills to be able to cope with this, because it's not just going to be the swimming pool. At some point, it's going to be a whole lot of other things in life that are infinitely more difficult than that, right? So we start building these skills for them and say, this is what's going to happen. Here's the markers that you're going to get that are going to tell you that it's over. And when you do listen, it's all going to be great. You're going to get this fabulous reward that you really like, which is so much better than wasting the time to throw the hissy because you had to get out of the pool. Okay, the importance of the function of the behavior, and asking when you need some help for an FBA, the functional behavior assessment. When you know the function, you can create an effective intervention and give a replacement behavior. So important to give a replacement behavior. You know, in different circumstances, different replacement behaviors, but you know, for the whole thing of the example that I was just giving about getting out of the pool, the replacement behavior is that on the 5-minute thing, that the child has the opportunity, I say, you know, in 5 minutes we're getting out of the pool. The child says, okay, mom, right? But we can also teach this child at the 5-minute mark, not at the 1-minute mark, because that's going to make it difficult down the road. But at the 5-minute mark, just say, can I have 2 more minutes than what you're giving me? And if they ask appropriately, saying, yes, you can. You can have 2 more minutes in the pool because you asked me so nicely. There's the reinforcement. You've used the proper functional communication skills to ask for more time, right? So you can have more time. Always want to have a replacement behavior, right? Because we're not expecting behavior just to poof and go away and be left with nothing. There's no vacuum in behavior. We're always behaving. So we give that replacement behavior. Okay, we're running down on time. Can you tell I'm speeding up here? Let's take a minute to talk about meltdowns. What's the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown? I think it's different for different people, but the criteria that I usually think of is that the tantrum started because the child wanted or didn't want something, generally, right? Whether it was attention or access to something or to get away from something, it's generally, you know, involved in that. And we would never deliberately give them the thing that they wanted, but imagine if you did, like the child with the attention, you know, if we gave them the thing, it would in some way help them, right? And it would help them to start to calm themselves down. If the child's tantruming for a cookie and you said, no, they can't have the cookie, and you gave them the cookie, they'd be like, oh, great, I got my cookie. They wouldn't keep crying, right? They'd be like, I got my cookie, I'm gonna go sit and watch my video. But there are times when we cross over into something that becomes bigger, that it's not about the cookie anymore. It is an emotional outburst that is not consolable. That's the meltdown. There's no getting back from it easily. The child is entrenched in it. They're having a big emotional reaction, and it's not easily fixable. That is meltdown territory. And when we get to a meltdown, it's especially important to look at what happened before, because a lot of times there's an MO, a motivating operation, that is at work when we get a tantrum. So imagine that you've gone to the grocery store and you're in the checkout line and you're getting regular tantrums because the child sees a particular type of lollipop that they want. And at some point they wanted a lollipop and somebody gave it to them, and at some point they tantrumed and potentially somebody offered them the lollipop, or they thought they were getting a lollipop, so they think this is going to work. I'm going to throw the tantrum and I'm going to get the lollipop. And imagine that you've been working on it and it's getting better, but today your child got very little sleep because their nap got interrupted and lunch wasn't something they particularly liked, so they're hungry, or maybe lunch, you haven't gotten to lunch yet, so you've got a tired, hungry child. How more likely are we that we're going to get a meltdown than just a tantrum, right? That it's going to escalate to a place that it did not need to go, right? Of course, we're more likely to get that. And a lot of times, a lot of times, the meltdowns, there is some environmental factor. And it could be something like their schedule is off. It could be that they're having an allergic reaction to something, that they're having a health issue, that they're having a sensory issue. I mean, really, I talked earlier about my son and the floor tile. That's really what he was having, was a sensory issue that was taking things to a level that it was no longer comfortable. So you've really got to look at from a 360-degree view and say, okay, what is setting this up for this blow up? And it really requires getting to know your child's ecosystem, right? There may be that certain foods you give your child and you're seeing the meltdowns happen afterwards. At this point, if you're having meltdowns on a regular basis, you really want to start keeping a chart. And it's really going to be important to put the times on and the days on and start to think about my schedule and what coincides with this, and keeping track of the kinds of things that your child eats. Because we do see meltdowns happen sometimes after eating certain kinds of foods, if the child has a sensitivity to it or has an allergy to it. I can tell you, I mentioned earlier, I am allergic to wheat. And if I eat wheat, I am going to have a meltdown. I can tell you what it feels like. It feels like my blood pressure goes up into my head and that there are bumps underneath my skin and I'm uncomfortable and hot and miserable. And if you say something to me when I'm like that, I am likely to snap your head off, right? It isn't pleasant, and I know that from firsthand experience. So, but it could be something. Some of our kids have such sensory issues on their skin that the seam of a shirt or the label in the back just drives them crazy. And you know what it's like, or maybe it's a noise that they're hearing. You know, haven't you had the experience where somebody is doing something that you just go, I need you to stop? I mean, please stop. And if our child doesn't have functional communication, you know, maybe there's a buzz in a light that's just, it's just wearing on them, right? So we got to look for those environmental cues and narrow it down and say, okay, well, this tantrum is happening in this classroom. What's different about this classroom? Are there things here, you know, what color is the carpet? What kind of lighting is it? What, you know, if it's only happening in this space, there's something going on in this space. It might be the teacher, but it might be the environment, right? Try to head off meltdowns at the pass before it gets too bad. Figure out for your individual child what will help. My sister had 3 kids, and one of them would have the mother of all meltdowns. And it took her a long time to figure out, but it was a certain food from a certain fast food restaurant that for whatever reason her child could not handle. But one of the things that they found, because she would get so upset and be so unhappy that she would lose control of herself. And one of the things that they found was that if they put her into just like an inch of water, even fully clothed, it would calm her down. You know, that's not going to be the case for everybody, and I'm certainly don't leave them unsupervised, but you know, even with small children, if they're getting upset, to give them, you know, a disposable pie pan with just a little bit of liquid and put their hand in it. For some kids, that can be the thing that calms things down. But find out what that is for your child, so that when you have stop points built in, that we're not going to let things get to the point where the child is inconsolable. If you see it happening, you know that you're starting, you know, because some kids, they get overheated, and if you see your child starting to get overheated, then you're taking off the layers so that they're still dressed, but in the least amount that they can be in and be socially acceptable, right? For other kids, you know, it's blood sugar kinds of things, and so, you know, having a juice box or something so that when you see the child starting to go there, being able to give them something to drink, you know, whether it's food, whatever it is, but try to head it off at the pass. It means a little bit of preparation and getting to know your child, but hey, we're in that business anyway, right? Think about strategies for antecedent modifications, really important with meltdowns, so that you're saying, okay, I know this is a circumstance in which my child is more likely to have had it, so I'm not going to push that. My son, it was like he had a bucket that he could take so much sensory, and he could be at a party and he'd get to a certain point and then that was it, right? So I was always looking for, all right, we want to leave before we get to that point of the party. I'm going to watch for the signs, and when I see that we've gotten to this point, this is the point where we can leave and we're not going to have a meltdown. And again, build in stop points. Why meltdowns happen at the worst possible moment? Because it's like our kids have a sixth sense, and all creatures have a sixth sense. It's why our child waits until we're on the phone to want to engage with us, right? Because they have a sixth sense that we're busy in this moment and they're going to get away with more stuff, whether they're vocal or not. I used to have a dog that was that way. She would not have anything to do with me. I would get on the phone, and that was when she would whine and cry for the treat that she wanted, because she knew she was more likely to get it because I was occupied. It's always that moment when you're running out the door and you're about to be late for something. It's the one moment that you just need your child to go with the flow that they're going to have the meltdown. Not just the tantrum, but the meltdown. You have to remember that they are very in tuned to us. And if we're stressed and we have an agenda, they sense that. They really, really do. So in those moments, and I'm working on being better at this, in those moments when we're about to lose it and have the meltdown too, to be able to take the breath, as Evelyn Gould says, take the space, and get back to basics and say, what are they communicating to me? Because even if you've got someplace that's absolutely essential that you have to be, you're going to get there quicker without the meltdown, right? So taking the time to center yourself and say, okay, this isn't a coincidence. This is happening in the worst possible moment. It's exactly happening in this moment because we're sharing some energy here. I got to calm down and cope with my child before we get to the meltdown. I think, have a plan. Be willing to let other stuff go in order to carry out a plan. We used to have meltdowns by the birthday cake aisle. And it was his hugest reinforcement that he wanted the birthday cake aisle. And what I had to do was have a shopping trip plan to the store where I didn't need anything, so that if he had the meltdown, we would leave without going to the birthday cake aisle. And boy, did he square his ducks up when he saw, oh, if I behave this way, I am not going to get to the birthday cake aisle. We never had a meltdown again. Always have an out. Always give the child an opportunity to earn something back. Don't ever get to the point where you're absolutely inflexible. If you said, for a while when my son was hitting, we said, if you hit, you lose your Legos for the day. Okay, and so we stuck to that. If you hit, the Legos are gone for the day. But have something else. Don't ever have the child feel like they've lost all opportunity. There's no hope, because that's when you will get the worst meltdown of all time. So, okay, you lost your Legos, but come on, we're going to go to the park instead. Don't feel like you're reinforcing the behavior because they did lose something. And if you've, planned right, and we try not to make it that, that cost, instead work towards getting something for good behavior instead of losing something. But in extreme circumstances, we will use that. And especially, don't take it personally. It's hard. It's really, really hard not to take it personally, but don't take it personally. We are so very close to being out of time. I want to remind all of you that tomorrow on the show, we are going to have Evelyn Gould talking with us at 10 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, it's Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Our special guest, Gabrielle, and why is her last name escaping me right now? It's something -Mayer. Frustrating. But in any case, She will be with us talking about cooking with our children and how we can use it as a natural environment training. It's really going to be exciting on Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And again, Nancy Oswald Jackson will be joining me. So many ways for you to get in touch with us, but the most important is email. You can get a hold of us through email, you can phone us, you can Skype us, you can Facebook us, you can tweet us. Please take advantage of those. Please watch us on Blip, watch us on... It's all free on all of those different sites because we want to get this information to you in a really easy format and a free format, right? And write to us and tell us if we're getting it done, if we're not, what you need, because we're here to support you. You're doing a good job. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye.